Go Figure TV. Revolutionary salute. Revolutionary salute. Like, share, subscribe. Welcome to the House of Revolution. You know I'm your humble host, the Yamin of Revolution, U.S. military humiliated. The D.E.I. Army defeated. Iran shocks the world. But before we get into that, y'all be sure to wipe y'all feet. That means hit the like button. You in the House of Revolution. Like, share, subscribe, support the platform. Y'all, Trump will be impeached and convicted. Plenty of U.S. generals and probably senators and congressional leaders will go to prison. The U.S. has fallen and been humiliated before the world. Let's get to the content. Salute.
To Iran. Major breaking news as of this morning. Let's put it up here on the screen. The United States, per Reuters, is now running out of virtually all long-range precision missiles during the Iran war, per Reuters. This is an internal U.S. government assessment that has been passed around now for the last week and reportedly was one of the main reasons that Donald Trump decided not to go through with that full-scale attack on Iran, not some fake peace talks that were not actually happening. I'm going to read from some of this story because it's so vitally important. The United States Army has now used much of its stockpile of highly accurate long-range missiles during its 5-month war with Iran. The missiles are principally the Army's surface-to-surface weapons known as the Army Tactical Missile System, the ATACMS, and precision strike missiles, the PRISMs. The U.S. has, quote, used virtually all of these weapons. The degree to which the military is running out of these specific missiles has not yet been previously reported. The long-range munitions were an important part of the military arsenal before the war, allowing accurate strikes from a safe distance. The U.S. supplied weapons have now played a key role also in the war in Ukraine, where they currently are asking the United States for more of them. However, as we now know, virtually all of them have been used. According to this reporting, Crystal, Reuters says that CENTCOM actually used all of the missiles that they had in their domain and have had to draw down, as we saw previously with the THAADs and others, from virtually all the other theaters around the world. The next time that the PRISM missile, which is replacing the ATACMS missile, will come online to the United States in production is 2027. So we will have to wait a full year before new ones will begin to enter the arsenal. This is honestly, look, we knew it was bad. Didn't know it was this bad.
Iran will not wait a year for the U.S. to rearm. Iran last night attacked the U.S. bases. The news don't even want to talk about it, but we got the video. Other stations around the world is talking about it. Iran is still attacking the U.S. CNN and Fox. They're trying to act like it's not happening because they have been humiliated. And they will be defeated. And they will have to surrender soon. They can't even defend themselves.
They also, actually, I just want to say, it's not just these land missiles that are vitally important for the United States. It's the Tomahawk supplies as well, something that has not been covered nearly as much because we do have more of them. But approximately 50% have now been used in the war with Iran. Again, it takes years in order to just make even a few dozen or so of these things from a single factory here in Arizona, just to demonstrate the billions of dollars that have now been expended in terms of the munitions in this war and the trade-offs that will be needed. Last thing that I do think is so vitally important and also shows the strategic problem that we face is that they note inside of this U.S. government assessment that the reason why that we're running so low on these weapons and we've been so heavily reliant on them is we did not want to risk manned pilots dropping many of those other types of munitions over Iran out of fear that they would get shot down, which means that the United States does not have the total air supremacy over Iran and that they remain afraid that we would have more cheap, as we saw in the final days of the war before the full-scale war before the ceasefire broke out. So overall, a vitally dire position for the United States to be in. Can't emphasize enough how important these missiles obviously were in the course of the war and in terms of the war plans for all of the other different theaters, including Russia and China. So the number one determining factor, it appears, as to whether the United States even can resume a full-scale all-out war against Iran, even if it wanted to, just 5 months is all it took to basically expend most of them.
Absolutely insane. And as people have been covering this for years at this point, it is shocking just how bad the situation is. I mean, what can you even say about this? Where does all the money go? What have you people spent all of our tax dollars on? I mean, we fund the Pentagon more and more and more every single year, whether it's a Democratic or Republican administration. The last time we had any sort of cuts was actually under Obama with that sequestration deal with the Republicans. Outside of that, the line just continues to go up.
See, these racist, white supremacist bigots, even these people was preaching Ukraine and NATO was going to defeat Russia. Their worldview is shattered right now. It's not, they in a new world. Where's all our money been going? You've been getting finessed. But the bigger problem is your D.E.I, white supremacist army with your white supremacist generals has been humiliated. They fired all the black generals, most of them, because they didn't want them to lead the army. So this was the white supremacist Keith Hegseth and his Christian radical or white Christian Crusader army has been humiliated before the world. That is what's happening. It's not this loss historically. It's not going to be on us because the whole world know they fired the black generals. Some black generals stepped down out of protest, like the ones didn't want to be involved in killing people in the Caribbean. He gonna be held as a hero, but demoted a lot of black leaders. Yeah, and this humiliation is on the DEI whites who were unqualified. The leader of the U.S. military right now was a 3-star. He said some nice words to Trump, Dan Cain. They call him Raising Cain. Trump fired the black guy, put this DEI white guy in charge of the U.S. military. Now they're getting their ass tore off the bone. And he was the exact type of person that they always preached about. Unqualified person just getting a job. But they say that about blacks. No, Dan Cain was unqualified, the white racist, to be the leader of the U.S. military. It was a black guy. They fired him, put him in charge. Now look what happened.
Pete Hegseth is demanding $1.5 trillion. What is the money going to? Complete insanity. So to your point, look, what we did in the initial round of the wars, we used a lot of these precision long-range weapons. Why? Because our planes kept mysteriously falling out of the sky. Remember those claims in the early days that there were like 3 fighter jets that were down by friendly fire? Yeah, I'm sure we all believe that one. In any case, we're having all kinds of problems being able to establish that air superiority. So we're using these long-range missiles in order to hit targets. That is no longer an option. So next time Trump goes out there and says, oh, we're going to bomb their bridges, we're going to commit all these war crimes, we're going to bomb their water infrastructure, et cetera, with what? What are you going to use for that? So it just underscores once again, there is no military solution to the problem of Iran. The only solution is a negotiated diplomatic solution. The only solution is to surrender, is to admit defeat. That's where we're at. I mean, it's completely insane that the U.S. military, which had all this projection of strength and all of this,
couldn't even fight. They can't even deal with Iran for 6-7 months. Russia has been crippling and defeating NATO and Ukraine for 4 years. That's how superior their military is to the U.S. because Putin not going to let the military steal money. They better make those weapons. I said this before. The reason North Korean military is superior to the U.S. military because those generals better not steal kill money. They better make those weapons or they're going to die. China, you better make those weapons or you're going to die. Iran, you better make those weapons. You better not try to steal from the people. Only in the U.S., they can steal our money. We lose the wars. Nobody go to jail. They deserve what's happening to them.
This money, spend way more on it than any other country in the entire world, cannot even sustain this long of a conflict and is thoroughly defeated. So, as things go on, we were lucky to get the terms of the original MOU. That MOU is no longer on the table. The Iranians are going to drive a hard bargain because they're reading this reporting. They know the situation. They know that we have no real options to turn this thing around. So it just underscores what a dire situation Donald Trump has gotten us into.
I really just can't even, look, we knew the situation was bad. CSIS has a good handle. Again, you can go and look at all their methodology. Ben Shapiro looking at you. Apparently he thinks he knows better than the people who are literally connected to the war industrial base, funded by them in many respects. But okay, so where we are right now is that CSIS had previously pegged it at around 45% of all of them expended. We now know that that's not even the case. It's even more. And it appears that because of their ability to estimate methodology, they can actually undercount the number of missiles used. The internal assessment really matters in terms of what they're pointing out, especially because with those prisms, for example, I believe the number was fewer than 100 that we even had before going into the war. Another 120 will take about a year or so to come online. The Tomahawks as well, I've talked about this, to many ends, especially about the factories and the initial process and the way that it's all there. You could spend all the money in the world and it still wouldn't work, but it does still show you we have been spending all the money in the world. We had years to plan for exactly a crisis moment like this from 2022 onward. Biden squandered all of that. He basically gave, the entire barn over to Ukraine. And now we've got nothing left, especially with Ukraine with their hands out today for all of these even more critical missile systems. And the bottom line remains the United States is afraid of being able to take casualties in the air over Iran. So they're heavily reliant on this. And now we're going to be in a situation where if the war does have to escalate, or not have to, but if they want to escalate it again, a lot of people's lives are going to be seriously at risk, both from the interceptor stockpiles being so low that they'll have to ration, and a lot of pilots, may be at risk up in the air. And we already saw with the F-35, the so-called friendly fire shutdowns. There's 2 tankers that allegedly, ran into each other. So there are all kinds of sketchy, situations that are all happening here. But it does explain all of Trump's BSing behavior, because he remains totally committed to this idea that we are going to have, some sort of talks. And in fact, we have here saying that talks are underway by Donald Trump. This is his claim yesterday in the Oval Office.
Iran said that's a lie. He talking to himself. And shame on the media, bro. CNN, Fox News, MSNBC. And no one should say there's any talks. Iran attacked these people last night. Trump is talking to himself to manipulate the market and to make the American people think that he's in control. Iran said, who the hell is he talking to? Because we're still shooting at you.
B2, let's take a listen.
Are the talks with Iran now off and are airstrikes
No,
back
they're
on?
on. They're going on right now. It's an amazing thing. We have a little problem with Iran because we have many talks and we'll say we have or we don't have. We're straight about it. But they deny, but they're not denying it now. They just put out a statement not denying it. But for some reason, they when they're talking, they don't like saying that they're talking, their senses. So they called me and they said, please don't attack. We'll make a deal. That's the real truth. And everyone knows it.
Sure.
And who wouldn't call?
That's the real truth.
And that's the humiliation of America. The whole world is looking at America like this is a clown show, bro. And the media should be ashamed of themselves. They're supposed to be letting Trump know, sir, I know Iran and said you're lying, sir. They're attacking us, sir. You're the one saying it's talks, and then Iran come out. Trump say, yeah, we talk behind closed doors, and then they come out and say they're not true. Because you're lying, Trump. Iran don't want to talk to you. You ran out of weapons. They're going to attack you till you surrender, bro. Your white supremacist BS is up.
Meanwhile, the actual truth, let's put B3 up here on the screen. Per Wall Street Journal and the Iranian Foreign Ministry, here's what they say. Iran's foreign ministry, there are no discussions underway with the United States. There are no plans to have any discussions. The only discussions are currently with Oman, which continue on managing traffic through the passage. Trump calls Tehran unbelievably duplicitous. And in fact, what we already see is that even these talks with Oman about some sort of managed route for the future through the Strait of Hormuz is not a guarantee. We have had multiple vessels, including, again, maybe an hour or so before we even began this show, of another one that was just hit by an Iranian projectile in the Strait of Hormuz, trying to transit in a different manner. The current estimate is that there's a lot of black market traffic that is moving through the strait, approximately 5 million barrels a day or so. They're called ship-to-ship transfers, where it comes on one ship and a blockade runner takes it to another ship. Hyper inefficient, very, very expensive. Obviously, with the current price of oil, some people are willing to risk it, but it pales in the 20 million barrels a day that were originally moving through the Strait of Hormuz, and explains why, even with oil prices, quote, down around $80, $85 per barrel, it is still going to be punishingly high at the gas station for all of us. And to that point, by the way, Trump now basically abandoning even trying to get oil prices down, by increasing the supply, is now saying that the oil companies are making too much money. B1, let's take a listen.
Exxon and Chevron, Integrated Oil U.S., just announced record profits second quarter. Unbelievable For Exxon, for instance, 14 million houses they've had in over a decade. For Chevron for the quarter, highest in history.
By 12 times.
On the back.
You saw that.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, it's unbelievable. On the backs.
I don't like it.
Workers paying higher debts. Is our.
They're making too much money. Okay. Based on a shortage, they're making too much money. I don't like it. And I should be the last one to say, because I'm a big free.
What a scammer. What a scammer. And they all laughing at the American people. I don't like it. I don't like that those oil companies are making all that damn money when he the one made sure they got the money. They made sure he did what he doing, just scamming the American people.
Free enterprise guy, nobody bigger. And, you know, you're going to see oil when we're finished with Iran, you're going to see the prices drop through the floor. But they made too much money, too much money. Chevron, too much money. ExxonMobil, too much money. When you look at one company where they made 12 times what they made the year before, they're going to give some of that back to the public. And they better cut the retail price, the consumer price. Too much money. You're surprised I'm saying it? I'll say it loud and clear. I'm not happy about it.
He's not happy about it. He's going to tell them or send them a very strongly worded truth to tell them to drop their price. So, I mean, first of all, there's a lot of funny things you could say about free enterprise and all of that. But, look, is he actually going to do anything to tell them not to do that? No, he can't actually, because of where things are today. He could try the export ban. It would be a disaster in the long run and probably lead to outright shortages, probably destroy the global oil market as we know it. And in the long run would actually make oil prices much higher for everyone. There's only one thing you can do, which is end the war. You end the war, then yeah, okay, we can have some oil that's going to go through. But still not accepting it. As of this morning, retail gasoline average $4.08 a gallon around the nation, still well over $5 in California. So that's where things are.
Yeah. Well, one other breaking news, we've got Scott Bessent.
Running out of ideas, and he's now asked the U.S. military for creative and unconventional ideas to punish Iran. So no, this is not a joke. They actually sent out an email looking to crowdsource ideas of what other ways can we actually punish Iran, pressure Iran to get them to do whatever it is that we want them to do, which they don't even know what they want Iran to do. So how are you going to pressure them when you can't even come up with a clear objective for how you end this war, what the actual end game is, especially when the Israelis are controlling everything and saying, nope, that's not enough.
What's the ultimate humiliation? The U.S. military asks soldiers, asks anybody, asks you, asks kids who play Call of Duty, could you please give us some help? How do you think we can defeat Iran? This is crazy.
Nope, we want more. Well, this came from CNN. It's an exclusive saying the request from a senior officer at the U.S. military command carrying out President Donald Trump's war with Iran came in an email. We need ideas. Quote, we're looking for new, creative, and unconventional ways to pressure and punish Iran. An officer in U.S. Central Command's intelligence branch wrote in a message sent Wednesday to a broad group of military analysts, according to a source familiar with the message. A second source also said that a senior U.S. military officer sent the message last week soliciting new ideas for how to deal with Iran. Saying the crowdsourcing style query, which military officials said was unusual over email, is one sign of the limited and potentially unpalatable options available to Trump to force Iran into a deal on his terms. Hoping to find an alternative, the official at CENTCOM kicked off the brainstorming session via email to see if anyone had a better idea. The second source said CENTCOM is looking at everything, acknowledging it needs to reevaluate the strategy. I'm going to give them props for this because at least they are asking, well, what else can we do rather than bomb them to oblivion, which is going to cause them to bomb the Middle East infrastructure to oblivion, which is only going to hurt the world. It's going to hurt the Middle East energy, but it's also going to hurt Americans. And what else can we do besides sending ground troops in? What else can we do besides dropping a nuke on Iran? What are our options? Come up with something creative. Well, if you watch my show, you already know I don't buy the official story at face value. Whether it's economic policy, foreign wars, or media narratives, I've often seen how the public gets told one thing while something very different is actually happening underneath. And which is to continue a war and send in American troops. I think that's pretty obvious to everybody. It says, quote here, U.S. Central Command has a long history of thinking and working in innovative ways. Captain Timothy Hawkins, a spokesperson for CENTCOM, said in a statement. Admiral Cooper, in particular, reaches out to members of our great team, regardless of rank, to achieve the highest levels of operational performance possible. Again, I'm going to give these guys props for this. I think this is great that they're actually saying, okay, what else can we do? We're at this. I mean, these guys don't have control over being at war. They're at war, whether they like it or not, because the president of the United States, who's working on behalf of Israel, has decided that the United States is at war with Iran. So these guys, they're trying to do everything they can to ensure troops aren't sent into Iran, because that is a death sentence. You get dropped in, they pretty much have to drop you in via air. And then how do they get you out? How do they get supplies to you? Nobody knows, right? So it's a disaster in the waiting. So these guys are being asked for their ideas. And I think that's a great thing. I mean, one idea would be, let's not do the war. Let's back out of the war. Let's let the Israelis deal with their own bidding if that's what they want to do. But if that's not an option, if the only option is war, then what other creative ways can you wage war rather than bombing them to oblivion, which is Trump. Trump says that is exactly what he plans to do. In fact, he said he was going to do the biggest attack since World War II. So you read between the lines on that one. That sounds like I was going to drop a nuke. Watch this.
So we had an attack that would be the biggest attack since World War II, and it would have been disastrous for them, and they didn't want us to.
Right. They didn't want us to do it. We would have done the biggest attack since World War II. They didn't want us to do it. So now they're back at the negotiating table for the 100th time, right? Well, according to Reuters, Iran has got their own creative ways of dealing with the war, and that is the economic pain. So the United States is at a loss because we don't have something like the Strait of Hormuz that we can close down and create economic pain against the Iranians. The Iranians, however, do have an alternative solution besides blowing everything to oblivion, and that is economic pain. That eventually Americans will cave, will bend, will give up, will retreat when we have so much economic pain. So according to Reuters, says how Iran is widening its pressure campaign to force U.S. concessions. Iran is betting it can outlast Washington by turning the Middle East trade routes, shipping lanes, and energy infrastructure into pressure points that steadily raise the cost of confrontation, according to Gulf officials and analysts. Rather than seeking a decisive military victory, Tehran is pursuing a strategy of calibrated escalation aimed at widening the conflict without triggering full-scale war. The goal, they say, is to convince the United States and its allies that containing the crisis is more costly than accommodating Iran's demands over the Strait of Hormuz. The message from Tehran is that unless Washington accepts a new status quo that gives Iran a greater role in Hormuz, the conflict could spread beyond the Gulf. By putting multiple maritime choke points and energy assets at risk, Iran believes it can strengthen its hand in any future negotiations. And it's been working, obviously. I mean, we're at a loss. We're asking to crowdsource ideas for how to deal with Iran. And all the Iranians have to do is create economic pain, economic pressure points, and also threats. I mean, Iran says, look, we don't need to attack the United States directly. If the United States bombs our infrastructure, we're going tit for tat. We're going to bomb the infrastructure throughout the Middle East in all of the nations that are hosting U.S. bases. You're all legitimate targets. That's what Iran is saying to them. And I think that's, you know, if you're looking at things objectively, war games, that sounds pretty fair. I mean, any country hosting the enemy's base would be a legitimate target. And if that enemy is launching attacks from those bases and they're attacking your energy infrastructure and putting your population at risk, then yeah, you know, it's a legitimate target. So the Iranians have a couple of aces up their sleeves, and that is they've closed the Strait of Hormuz, even though Trump says it's open. You know, we keep hearing these really conflicting reports because on one hand, we're hearing, no, the strait is open. America controls the strait. And then today, Trump says, no, we're going to have the strait open tomorrow. So wait a minute, is the strait open today? Does America control the strait? If so, then why do we need to wait for tomorrow for the strait to be open? That is because he says that they're negotiating with Iran and they believe that the strait will be open tomorrow because how great the negotiations are allegedly going this time around for the 100th time. But watch what he says about this. So do we have control over the strait or not? I'm going to guess not.
One way or the other. It's not very complex. We're talking about the strait, the opening of the strait, having it open literally by tomorrow, completely open. And that's phase one. And phase two is we then will talk about the nuclear capacity, the nuclear, as we've been mentioned. Basically, it's, I think, the denuclearization of Iran has to happen.
I thought that already happened with Operation Midnight Hammer. How many times do we have to say this over and over for people to understand it? So the main goal right now is to open up the Strait of Hormuz, which was open before we started this war. And there were no problems with the Strait of Hormuz before we started this war. Then we start the war, the strait closes. Every single war game said that's exactly what would happen, but Washington acts surprised. And now here we are, and Trump is saying, then the next step is denuclearization, which we already were in the middle of with the JCPOA. You might say, well, that was a bad deal. Well, it was certainly better than this. That's for damn sure. Whatever this is worse. This is not working. The Iranians are not giving up their ability to enrich some levels of uranium. Everybody needs to get that through their thick skull at this point, because they have the upper hand. They can economically crush us. They can absolutely bomb the energy infrastructure of all of the Gulf nations because they're totally unprotected. I say, no, the Americans are there protecting those energy infrastructures. No, they're not. They're over there protecting Israel. The rest of the Middle Eastern countries are sitting ducks. That is why the Saudis, allegedly, Trump was going to be doing this World War II style bombing. And the Saudis called and panicked and said, absolutely do not do this. We are going to be under attack. The Saudis know they won't be protected by the United States. The U.S. isn't able to protect them because the Iranians blew up a
World War II style bombs with what? The U.S. is exposed. What they gonna bomb them with? Water balloons or something?
lot of protection infrastructure. First of all, and secondly, the U.S. is over there really protecting Israel. The Saudis know this. The other countries know this. They don't want to be targeted. So they called Trump and they said, don't do this. Come up with a different way. You're going to ruin not only our economies, but you're going to ruin your own economy by going in this direction. Cenk Uygur, I think, said it eloquently. So let's go ahead and share his tweet. He says, Trump didn't bomb Iran this weekend. I'll take it. The Saudis and every other country called him to say that if he bombed Iran's oil facilities, they were going to bomb everyone else's. The Iranians said, we're going to bomb everyone else's. And disaster was guaranteed. So he keeps having to decide between the
Iran foreign ministers, called every last one of those Arab puppets, let them know exactly what they was going to bomb, told them the kingdoms, the castles, that's not, they palaces, not off limits, and warned them. Let them know, ain't going to be no surprise attack. If Trump do what he say we're going to do, y'all finished. And them Arabs hurry up and call Trump.
The world and Israel.
Because they know the U.S. can't defend them no more. They're watching. The U.S. cannot even defend themselves.
Yeah, he is. The Israelis aren't happy about this. They want him to just bomb around to oblivion and to hell with the rest of the Middle Eastern nations, because this is part of Israel's plan. They want nothing more but to become the energy resource throughout the Middle East, which then later on becomes the energy resource for the world. Netanyahu even came out the last couple of days, today, yesterday, saying that he's wanting Israel to develop their own now stealth planes. So they're building their own instead of buying from the United States, which is what they've been doing. They're now going to be building their own stealth planes. How would he have the ability to do that? Does anybody ask that question? How would they be able to have the technology and the ability to do that? Part of it is because, well, they've infiltrated every aspect of our U.S. government. So they're spying on us. They're spying on the tech. They're in the military industrial complex. So they know how to do it. They've got the engineering schemes. And now we're entering into an agreement where we're going to be partners, not just, oh, we support them, we give them weapons, we give them money. Instead, we're partners, which means they'll have access to everything so they can build their own. We are single-handedly, this is how stupid our government is right now. We are single-handedly helping the rise of a new empire, one that will absolutely replace the United States, and that is Israel, because Israel has the growing monopoly on tech, on AI, on the new age weaponry, laser beams. And they're also going to have access to all of our current military. They probably already have access to it, but they're going to have more access to our current military schemes. They will build up, they will weaponize, they will do deals the same way China did. They figured out from the Chinese and the Americans how to dominate the world. And that is, the Chinese made deals. The Chinese went around and said, we will build you bridges. We will build you ports. We will build railroads. They went around to countries doing this. So these countries said, oh, wow, they're going to help build us up. Okay, great. What's the trade-off? They have to be friendly to the Chinese, right? They have to be allied with the Chinese. So they undercut us by doing deals. We were dropping bombs. They were building bridges. The Israelis learned from that. So what are the Israelis doing? They're going around making deals with countries about tech, surveillance, AI, defense, using tech, using AI rather than the military might of the United States military. Don't need that anymore moving into the future. They're instead going to be using their own new developed weapons that the United States is also reliant on, by the way, because of what Congress is doing in an act of treason by partnering with the Israelis and merging our militaries together. So you've got the Israelis that are going to be, they're out there doing deals. They see how the Chinese did it and they said, okay, we're just going to go around. We're going to do deals with all of these countries. And these countries are going to become reliant on us. They're going to need us. And they're also learning from the Americans that military might matters. So drop bombs, be scary as you possibly can, murder, massacre, genocide, children, and the world will fear you. So the world will fear you, and they'll also want to do deals with you, and up rises the Judean Empire. And it will happen. I am absolutely confident at this point that the Israelis will become the next big empire, much like Japan, much like the UK. You might say, well, they're so small. Okay, so is Japan. And so is the UK. They're little tiny islands. Israel can do it. If they can. And they will do it because our government is handing it to them on a silver platter. But helping them along in the process. We're actually handing over the empire keys, saying, go ahead, be going to look at not there's a lot that, Trump still is entangled, totally abandoned ship. They're off bombing Lebanon, killing kids. That's what they're off doing, taking land. Meanwhile, they've left us to deal with the Iranians because they control us, so they can. And Trump goes and says, the Iranian leadership is unbelievably duplicitous. They ask for a meeting. Some would say beg. Talks begin with more scheduled in the immediate future. And then they say openly and proudly that they're not having any discussions, that nothing is being talked about, and they're only dealing with Oman. Then they go on to give their usual blather and saying the Strait of Hormuz will be operated powerfully by them when it already completely controlled by the United States Navy and our blockade, or as some say, the United States wall of steel. Nothing gets through to Iran unless we want it to, and nothing will get through unless a deal or total surrender is accomplished. Right? Nothing's getting through, including our ships. So great. You've been able to stop the Iranians from bringing ships in and out, but they've been able to stop us from bringing ships in and out. So we're just at a complete standstill. Nobody's really, so, when the United States says, we control the Strait of Hormuz, they don't really mean that they're controlling the Strait of Hormuz. What they mean is, we're stopping the Iranians from getting ships through, which we don't even know if that's true or not. But we're not getting our ships through. So how are we? We're not really controlling it. So he goes on to say, Iran will never have a nuclear weapon. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Okay. He then talks more about the negotiations, saying, yes, they're actually happening, even though the Iranians deny it.
On behalf of the press corps, thank you, ladies, for what you do for our service members in this country. Mr. President, are the talks with Iran now off and our airstrikes back?
They're on. They're going on right now. It's an amazing thing. We have a little problem with Iran because we have many talks and we'll say we have or we don't have. We're straight about it. But they deny, but they're not denying it now. They just put out a statement not denying it. But for some reason, they, when they're talking, they don't like saying that they're talking.
Okay, well, they've come out with their statement saying, no, we are not talking. We're not talking at all.
The U.S. must learn to act like a responsible government. The behavior of the U.S. over the past 2 years has been similar to a mafia group that is bound by no law or regulation. They have questioned and violated all norms of international law both in words and actions. Surely, we cannot hope a reasonable diplomatic process would take shape as long as the US continues such behavior. What is in place now cannot be called a ceasefire. The fact that the situation was calmer over the past few days is owing to the measures of the armed forces of the Islamic Republic of Iran, who are keeping watch with open eyes. Surely any measure taken by the US will trigger a reciprocal and decisive response by Iran, just as we saw over the past 2 or 3 weeks.
The ministry's spokesman also rejected media reports about ongoing negotiations with the US. He said Iran is now holding talks only with Oman and on a mechanism for transit through the Strait of Hormuz. The aim, he said, is ensuring safe navigation that does not impinge on the sovereignty rights of the two littoral states. Baghai also said the US is by no means in control of the war and is caught in a quagmire of its own creation. The spokesman stressed that they must pay for the ignominy of their war. He said Iran will continue its defense as long as its national interest requires.
I mean, I don't believe anybody when it comes to war. I don't believe anybody. I don't know. Trump says, oh, they claim they're not talking to us, but they are talking to us. The Iranians just don't like to admit it. And then the Iranians said, no, we're not talking to them. We're not going to talk to them. The Americans have proved that they can't be negotiated with. And I don't know who to believe. I mean, I think the Iranians are right. I think that the United States has proven that it can't be negotiated with because we don't even know what we want, because we're waiting on the Israelis to tell us what to do. And the Israelis don't want us to end the war. They're not really interested in, promises, deals, JCPOAs. They're not interested in any of that. So we can't really actually have an end to the war because the Israelis won't really let us. We don't really know what we're negotiating. We don't know. So it is, I think most people lean on the side of Iran's probably telling the truth because we can see that the United States doesn't know what it's doing because we're waiting for the Israelis to give us our marching orders. So here we are. And it just looks like everything's a standstill. Trump is saying, no, we're negotiating and the strait is going to be open tomorrow because economists are freaking out. But will it be open tomorrow? I mean, historically, the trend has been, no, it won't be. We're going to continue on in this war for quite some time. There's going to be some economic pain that is felt. And the U.S. is now asking for creative ideas on how else they can deal with Iran. And let's hope somebody comes up with something, because it might spare us from having a bunch of ground troops entering into the country on a suicide mission, or worse, even a nuclear bomb being dropped on civilians. Thank you for watching this clip from the full Kim Iverson.
The world doesn't just point out every time President Trump does something obviously, transparently dumb, but that's what just happened. Specifically, for example, his routine where he threatens he's about to initiate a massive major strike against Iran, the biggest anyone's ever seen before, that will completely shock them into submission. And then he announces that somebody, the Pakistanis, the Qataris, the Saudis, the voices in his head, asks him not to, because they're so close to reaching a deal, and the Iranians themselves are begging for a deal, and so he doesn't go ahead with that strike. It is embarrassingly transparent, and it was even the first time it happened. I mean, at least embarrassing for all those members of his cabinet who have to pretend that it's not obvious at all and all totally legit. But with repetition, it becomes increasingly farcical, and the United States quietly becomes the laughing stock of the world. Quietly because, of course, world leaders have nothing to gain by upsetting Trump with their open mockery. But the Iranians, they have no such constraints, because what have they got to lose? So this weekend, we had the latest of the ridiculous will he, won't he exercises. Trump had threatened massive attacks. Again, the usual rhetoric, saying at a sycophants convention, a cabinet meeting, we will be hitting them very hard. At some point, he predicted, they're going to say, we just can't take it anymore. Iran had responded to all of this saying, fine, go ahead. We're ready for war. You strike, we strike, which isn't how the script is supposed to go, obviously. And then Donald Trump posted on social media this: we have just been asked by Iran and other Middle Eastern countries to hold off any attack in that the perimeters of a deal has been agreed to. This would include the immediate, complete, and total opening. Why, oh why, you might wonder, would it ever occur to Trump? But it would work for him to lie about such things in exactly that way, especially when he claims that the Iranians themselves asked him to, which anyone observing recent history would understand to be vanishingly unlikely. But it also kind of makes it easy for them to just contradict him in public. And that, of course, is what they did. And then some. Yes, they pointed out that they were not engaged in negotiations with the US at all right now, although they are having a grown-up talk with Oman about the future management of the Strait of Hormuz. But that was the least of it. Presumably, Trump thought that they would not be able to take it anymore because of how hard they were all laughing. Iranian media outlets were described by CNN as reacting with glee and mockery after Trump announced his latest climb down over the weekend. Trump the fool has run out of steam, said the Fars news agency. The Americans' mountain gave birth to a mouse once again. The semi-official agency mayor, believed to be closely aligned with the supreme leader, said this: Trump once again backed away from his hollow threats and presented his retreat to the world as a favor. Prominent hardline Iranian commentator Sayed Mohammad Marandi simply posted a picture of chicken tacos on Twitter, a reference to the Trump Always Chickens Out acronym. Iranian news agencies linked the retreat to the growing shortages of US air defense missiles because, again, it's patently obvious that it's a major factor, in spite of the surreal denials of the administration. For instance, Trump moaning and moaning that Biden gave weapons away, while also claiming, but nevertheless, they have all the weapons they could possibly need. Again, utterly, embarrassingly ridiculous for anyone with the capacity to feel embarrassment. It's true that, according to reports, Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman spoke to Trump on Saturday and urged for de-escalation, raising concerns about the impact of the alternative on his country, something that sounds highly feasible because it fits the known facts. So you think he could have just said that rather than claiming that the Iranians themselves were negotiating with them. But since Trump has followed this exact pattern numerous times to date, it's pretty hard to swallow the idea that he really was going to go for the biggest, the most dramatic, the most devastating strike of all time, just to be dissuaded by a phone call with the Saudis. Especially when the first time he pulled this theatrical display, he claimed it had been the Pakistanis. And then the office of the Pakistani Prime Minister accidentally posted the template statement on social media, revealing that they'd been in coordination with the White House all along, who had drafted for him what they wanted him to say. So yeah, standard pattern. Big, strong man can never show weakness, but he's somehow weirdly pliable to a range of third parties asking him to refrain from exercising his awesome world-changing power. But it gets even more ridiculous. The US military, having had manly man's man Pete Hegseth fire many of the most competent people, presumably because they weren't manly enough, sent out an email to a broad range of military analysts crowdsourcing, quote, creative and unconventional ideas for how it could punish Iran. The first answer, you might think, would have been to consult military analysts before blundering in the first place, and maybe not to fire the people who actually knew what they were doing. But it's a bit late for that now, so fair enough. It was a pretty bold admission, though, that having explored chucking loads of bombs at them, lying about them, begging for a deal, and then trying to get them to the table in spite of having just lied about them in public in order, hopefully that they might agree a one-sided deal in Trump's favor. Weirdly, none of that seemed to be working, and they are just playing out of ideas. Another signal ripe for Iranian mockery. But of course, it won't have been news to them because it's obvious to anyone watching that the Americans have been out of ideas pretty much from about day 5 of the conflict. You know, when it first dawned on them that the Iranian regime had not quickly collapsed as they'd been told and had assumed that they would. I do hope that one day, before I die, we will get full publication of all the responses that request to all those military analysts drew in, because I'm betting it would make for fascinating reading. Because how do you explain to someone like Trump, famously resistant to tedious things like reality, that he's dug himself into a hole and left himself with no good options in a war? I mean, they can't even manage to persuade him that the company he hired made a mess of refurbishing a reflecting pool. So good luck in doing it in an actual shooting war. There are no things he could do that wouldn't have been much better done at the beginning, instead of what he actually did do. His posturing has screamed weakness to the degree that the Iranians are now utterly convinced that they hold the cards and are determined to punish Trump for, in their view, breaking the terms of a memorandum of understanding for the ceasefire. Meanwhile, some media outlets reported all of this as though it meant something, as though Trump had really been about to make a massive strike, but got talked down. The oil price came down on Monday as though Trump's pretending negotiations that were imminently on the edge of a breakthrough were actually happening, which is all very puzzling when grown-ups decide to behave according to the rules of the children, and to do so after the charade has been played through again and again and again already. But there it is. That's the world as we know it today. Is this the way we should be talking about a war? Well, obviously not. War is a serious business with real, lethal, tragic consequences. According to Ali Vaiz of the International Crisis Group, the big game changer was the Iranian strike on July the 17th on US military sites in Jordan that killed several American soldiers. He told the New York Times that it not only showed that Iran's arsenal of missiles remained well stocked, in spite of all the US claims, but also that Tehran's intelligence on US locations and vulnerabilities was stronger than previously believed. Underestimating your enemy in war is a rookie mistake, but one often made by better strategists than Pete Hegseth. Vaiz observed that Trump has never grasped the motivations for the Iranians, how they can refuse to be bullied by the larger power. He has not learned the lessons of 8 years of trying to apply maximum pressure on them that has never once produced the results that he wanted. 'Cause sure, Trump famously does not learn lessons, and there it is in practice. How many more times will we have to go through this same cycle over and over again, as though it's Groundhog Day, but stupid rather than the smartly observed comic genius of the original? The problem for Trump is that the Iranians are now simply ignoring his demand for a deal, ignoring his request for negotiations. They're talking to their neighbor, not about opening the Strait of Hormuz tomorrow, because they say that won't happen so long as the Americans keep up their blockade and their attacks, but about the system for its operation for the longer term. Grown-up discussions for grown-ups. They may not be based on the interests of a wider global community. We may not welcome the results, but they are rational actors negotiating in pursuit of their own national interest, which we used to accept was the norm in terms of how geopolitics worked. If Trump can't abide anything, though, it's not being the central character of every drama, of being ignored. But if all he's got is a dwindling pile of missiles and bombs, a social media feed where he tells the most transparent lies in all caps, and a sense of growing frustration, it's kind of hard to see what he's going to do about it. The Iranians have said that they expect the process will go on for longer yet. The talks, they suggest, will not be meaningful, the ones with America, not until the Trump administration accepts its maximalist ambitions are off the table and is prepared to, in the American vernacular, to eat humble pie. Now, that's going to take a while. Indeed, just a few hours ago, Trump was whining on social media about the Iranians not going along with his charade. Although he didn't put it in those words, obviously. Iranian leadership is unbelievably duplicitous, he said. They ask for a meeting, some would say beg. Talks begin, with more scheduled in the immediate future, and they say openly and proudly that they're not having any discussions, that nothing is being talked about, and they're only dealing with Oman. And then he went on to boast about how the US has the upper hand and blah, blah, blah. And then he went back to posting things like this. No reason why that would accentuate the whole world laughing at Trump theme. So yes, it's Groundhog Day. Again, my advice is to go and watch the original movie, because, as is often the case, the remake's a bit rubbish.
Did Iran attack Kuwait just hours after US President Donald Trump called off strikes on the Islamic Republic? This dramatic footage, purportedly showing a massive fire in northern Kuwait, is sending shockwaves across the Middle East and all the way to Washington. Unverified reports claimed the blaze erupted after a series of powerful explosions, allegedly triggered by an Iranian Shahed 136 one-way attack drone strike. According to the reports, at least 3 attack drones were used. The alleged strike reportedly targeted Al-Doha military installation. It is no ordinary military installation. Located in northern Kuwait along Kuwait Bay near Kuwait City, the base serves as a key logistical hub for US and coalition forces operating in the Gulf. The facility has repeatedly been placed on heightened alert during periods of escalating regional tensions involving Iran and US military assets, making any reported attack there highly significant. However, none of these claims regarding fire caused by alleged Iranian attack has been independently verified. There is no official confirmation of the target, the extent of the damage, or whether there were any casualties. No group has claimed responsibility for the alleged strike. Reports also claim that the Kuwaiti armed forces did not activate air raid sirens or issue any public alerts following the incident, raising even more questions about what actually happened. So far, Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, has made no statement regarding the alleged attack on Kuwait. Kuwait has emerged as one of the Gulf states most affected by the ongoing conflict, with previous reported strikes targeting power and desalination plants, the airport, Al-Amadi port, and the KGL Halliburton compound. But as claims of an Iranian attack spread rapidly across social media, another narrative also emerged. Another report denied that Kuwait had come under attack at all, claiming the explosions and fire were the result of a live-fire military exercise being conducted by the Kuwaiti army. So what really happened in northern Kuwait? Was it the latest escalation in the widening regional conflict, or simply a military drill mistaken for an attack? For now, the footage has sparked intense speculation, but official answers remain elusive. The questions are mounting, the speculation is growing, but the truth is still waiting to emerge.
For more than 3 decades, Kuwait was one of America's safest military strongholds in the Middle East, a fortress, a logistics hub, a symbol of its power in the Gulf. But now, that fortress is no longer looking invincible. According to the Wall Street Journal, the United States is rethinking one of its most important military deployments overseas because the war with Iran has exposed a harsh new reality. Thousands of American troops, Abrams tanks, Patriot missile batteries. None of it guarantees protection against swarms of ballistic missiles and drones launched by Iran. Amid the conflict, Iran repeatedly attacks Kuwait's power plants, desalination facilities, international airport, and Persian Gulf port. The United States said its air defense systems intercepted most of the incoming attacks, preventing far greater destruction. But American bases themselves repeatedly came under fire. One Iranian strike in March killed 6 U.S. service members, one of the deadliest attacks of the war. The message was unmistakable. A massive military footprint can also become a massive target. According to U.S. officials cited by the Wall Street Journal, Washington is now weighing whether such a large permanent troop presence in Kuwait still makes military sense. The Pentagon had already been considering reducing its footprint before the war. Now those discussions have gained fresh urgency. The goal? Reduce risk without abandoning one of America's closest Gulf partners. For Kuwait, the calculations are equally complex. The country still sees the United States as its most important security partner. But the war has forced Kuwait's leaders to rethink how they defend the country against modern threats. Kuwait has already signed a new defense pact with Pakistan, while also seeking stronger air defense capabilities from Washington and other international partners. Officials insist there is no plan to replace the United States, but they do want broader security options in an increasingly dangerous region. For decades, American bases in Kuwait were seen as the ultimate guarantee of security. Today, that assumption is under unprecedented scrutiny. As missiles fly farther, drones grow deadlier, and regional tensions refuse to fade, Washington and Kuwait are both confronting the same difficult question. In the wars of tomorrow, does a larger military presence provide greater protection, or simply create a bigger target?
The Gulf is once again on edge. Air raid alerts, interceptor fire, and reports of hostile drones have triggered a fresh security scare in Kuwait. The country's military says its air defense systems are actively responding to what it describes as hostile drone threats, raising new concerns that the Iran crisis could be spilling into another key U.S. partner in the region. In an official statement, the General Staff of the Kuwaiti Armed Forces confirmed that air defense units had been activated to intercept incoming hostile drones. The military did not identify who launched the drones or specify the number involved, but said defensive operations were underway. The development comes despite there being no overnight reports of fresh strikes on Iran. However, several unverified reports circulating online claimed Iran had launched drones towards Kuwait, with some alleging that multiple military sites, including Ali al-Salem Air Base, were targeted. Those same reports claimed Kuwaiti air defense systems were engaging the incoming drones and suggested interception rates were limited. However, these claims have not been independently verified, and Kuwaiti authorities have not confirmed any strikes on military installations or provided details on damage or casualties. Ali Al Salem Air Base is one of Kuwait's most strategically important military facilities and has long supported U.S. operations in the Gulf. The latest security alert comes as questions continue over America's military posture in the region. Recent reports indicate the United States is reassessing its long-standing military presence in Kuwait after the conflict with Iran exposed new vulnerabilities, despite the country hosting thousands of American troops. While Kuwait continues to regard the United States as its primary security partner, officials on both sides are reportedly reviewing future defense arrangements in light of evolving regional threats.
Pleasure being on your show and being with your audience.
Let me start with what we just learned moments ago, that Yemen has attacked the Najran airport using drones. And it seems they said that they precisely hit the targets in that airport. It comes in a response of Saudi Arabia using the drones invading the airspace, and they're saying that they're responding to that. We have the Arbaeen, as you know, and in Iran, in Iraq, and the latest attack on the part of Saudi Arabia was on Iraq together with the United States. Many people are arguing maybe right after the Arbaeen, there would be some sort of response on the part of the Iraqi resistance. And what is the situation between Saudi Arabia and Yemen and together with Iraq?
Well, I've advised your viewers on multiple occasions and on different shows about reading the book Resistance by Alistair Crook. And I think it says a lot about the culture of resistance. And of course, going to Tehran by the Leverets. But Arbaeen is a very important day for people to understand. I think is very to understand this is very useful. It's the 40th day after the anniversary of the martyrdom of Imam Hussein in Karbala, when he stood up against the tyrant of his era in defense of the oppressed and the marginalized. And he refused to bow down, and his household, they were martyred, and his family was taken prisoner, and his sister, when she was imprisoned, she was resilient and spread the message of resistance. So Ashura is a very, very important day in the Iranian calendar, and Arbaeen, being the 40th day after the anniversary of Ashura, is a very important day as well in Iran, in Iraq, in Lebanon, and across the axis of resistance, and Yemen. And and there's a walk that happens every place, as many of your viewers probably know, in that goes to Karbala from different Iraqi cities, and millions of Iranians go every year. And in Iran, they have this walk in different cities. In Tehran, we had a huge crowd from a square, Imam Hussein Square in central Tehran, all the way to the south to Shah Abdul-Azim. Now, so the focus during these days are these commemorations and these gatherings, and the resistance in Iraq has basically said that its response, its retaliation, will come after Arbaeen, which in Iraq is tomorrow. In Iran, it's today, because of the moon, and so So today is Arbain, tomorrow in Iraq it's Arbain. So the Saudis have to be very concerned about what happens in the days ahead, because they and the Americans together bombed Iraqi Popular Mobilization Forces, and these are part of the Iraqi armed forces. What is often said in the Western media, they're not Shia militia. I was with them when they, I and a couple of other Iranians were with them when they liberated parts of northern Iraq, and in particular Arbil, and and Mosul, and we had dinner, or not dinner, but we spent the evening with a Christian Popular Mobilization Force commander. Throughout a day and a half, we were embedded in the Popular Mobilization Forces that were predominantly Sunni and Sunni parts of northern Iraq. So it's an Iraqi force. These are not Shia militias. These are linked to all those assets that were bombed by the Americans and the Saudis belong to the Iraqi government. They belong to the Iraqi armed forces, and they murdered a number of Iraqis plus 5 Iranian trainers. So after Arbain, the Saudis are definitely going to be much more concerned and worried about the response. And also, since 5 Iranians were killed, there's a lot of anger in Iran. The Saudis have sent a message to Iran actually claiming so they're saying that the Americans did it. But when the airstrikes were carried out, that's not what they said. So the Iranians are looking into this to see how credible this claim is by the Saudis. But it obviously shows how worried the Saudi regime is about the future. And remember, Saudi Arabia, Nima, is called Saudi Arabia. It's named after a family, the Saud family. That is not an entity that people are going to sacrifice themselves for, a country that's named after a family. But anyway, and also we have Yemen, which carried out a strike today against the Saudi regime, striking, from what I've just heard before coming onto your show, a radar installation. So, which means that they're preparing for future attacks, obviously. But in any case, there is relative quiet in the region, but events could, the events in the days ahead could be very different from the relative quiet that we see today. I mean, Iran struck Kuwait, as you know, and Iran struck a couple of ships near the Strait of Hormuz to enforce its command and control in accordance with the MOU. So a lot of things are not happening, but these are all significant. And they do show that the axis of resistance is what Trump would like to say, locked and loaded. And after Arbain, it's probably going to be even more so. And of course, we saw Trump's threats again last night. Apparently, he had heartburn, or his dinner didn't go down well with him. So he was again out angry and warning that Iran, they have to have an agreement with the United States within the next 24 hours or so. But Iran is not going to negotiate with the United States. That's not the plan. Dr. Araghchi, the foreign minister, he is in Iraq as we speak, in participating in the Arbain walk, and the others are all in Tehran. So there are no negotiations with the United States. And the negotiations with Oman are only about the Strait of Hormuz, nothing else, and how to manage the Strait of Hormuz. But the Iranians have said very clearly to Oman that we will have full supervision over everything that happens. In other words, there cannot be two corridors, one managed by Oman, one managed by Iran, where where they can choose which one to use, and so Iran would not know who's coming and who's going. That's not going to be an option. So either they do it together or it's managed by Iran. But in any case, Iran has to have full knowledge of what sort of ships want to pass through the strait, and of course, there will be a fee for each ship that wants to pass through the strait.
What is your understanding of because Donald Trump said at the last moment he has decided to cancel the attack on Iranians. You see Israeli media saying that they were prepared to do everything. They're somehow disappointed with Donald Trump, what he has done, canceling the attack. On the part of Iranians, we've learned that they are prepared for the attack. They're prepared to respond. What is the message from Donald Trump? He's talking about, just tweeted, he said that, two ways of, coming out of this, making a deal or total surrender, which is not something new from Donald Trump. What does deal mean, in your opinion, when it comes to Donald Trump? What does he want from Iran that it was not mentioned in that MOU, that document that was signed by two sides?
He doesn't want the MOU, obviously, but that's the only thing that's on the table. But Iran won't accept the MOU in its current form. Iran will accept the MOU plus. And so, for example, Yemen, Gaza will be more bold in the negotiations. The issue of the siege on Yemen has to be resolved. The ceasefire in Gaza has to be resolved. Although, the problem with Gaza is that regional countries, as you know, went to Egypt, Sharm el-Sheikh, and they basically endorsed Trump. The leaders of Muslim countries in the region and other countries beyond the region, they went and endorsed Trump and his fake ceasefire, and they basically allowed the Israelis to occupy well over 50% of Gaza, the Israeli regime. And since the ceasefire, we've had probably well over 1,200, maybe 1,300 murders by the Israeli regime. The last couple of days were particularly bloody. I think the day before yesterday, 8 children were among the people who were slaughtered in Gaza. So there's no ceasefire. But thanks to the leaders of the region who, it's well known, and anyone can go and look and see who was there, who went and endorsed Trump and who whitewashed Trump and who became guarantors of supposed guarantors of this ceasefire. And they praised Trump in the written document. It makes it more difficult for Iran to make demands with regards to Gaza because these countries effectively force Hamas to accept the ceasefire, and they endorsed Trump. So Gaza is an issue, but Iran is going to be more harsh when it comes to the Gaza issue. And as I said, the issue about Yemen will have to be resolved. But also, Iran will demand certain things up front. For example, again, I'm speculating, but Iran's stolen assets will have to be released. Because we saw in the MOU, Trump basically was not serious, as we expected. He was not serious in implementing the MOU. And he carried out none of his obligations, except for lifting the siege, basically. But that was for his own selfish gains. It was because of the shortage of energy. So, Trump is not going to gain anything through threats, and he's not going to gain anything if he does carry out his threats. It is quite possible that, because it's Trump, it's quite possible that he will do something crazy and that he will launch major attacks on Iranian critical infrastructure. even though he backed down 5 times at least in recent weeks. But um, nothing is impossible with this person in the White House, and especially with the Zionists and the Zionist lobby constantly putting pressure. We see how they're, how online and in the media, how active they are demanding all-out war and all-out destruction. I mean, these people are they're worse than Nazis. They speak about Nazis. They go far beyond them. They're open and uh, uh, they're very open about their views. They're genocidal and they're open about their genocidal behavior. And while journalists in the West like to deny that this is a genocide like Pierce Morgan, they're basically doing it for the sake of the Israelis because they are under the influence of Zionists. They're under the influence of the Zionist lobby. Hundreds of thousands of people have been killed in Gaza. It's not 80,000. Those are the bodies that were handed over to the hospitals, the Ministry of Health. But hundreds of thousands of people have died because of illness, a lack of medicine. The Israelis won't allow in food for people who need a particular diet. They don't allow them so that these children, these infants would die. They do it on purpose. They don't allow medicine in for people with diabetes and all these other illnesses so that people die. The objective is to cut down the population. I mean, these are monsters that and creatures that are unique in human history because they're doing it in front of the eyes of the world. And those people who facilitate it, those people who cover for it, they are equally evil. They're just as evil. They're enablers of this genocide. But that's why the world has turned against them, and that's why the world looks upon them with such disgust. So Trump may actually carry out these attacks against Iran. It's not impossible because look at what these people do in Gaza and get away with it. You see demands for assaults on Iran, a major assault on Iran coming from the Zionists or from former generals or people who are linked to power, or journalists, or people who make the case for war against Iran. But Iran is prepared, and Iran is not going to back down. Some people get upset when I say this, but the axis of resistance is unique, and the culture of the axis of resistance is, and there's nothing similar to it in this region and across the world. And it's that culture that makes these countries, these entities so special, whether it's Iran, Yemen, or Lebanon, or the culture of resistance in Iraq. They will not forsake Palestine, and they're making huge sacrifices. Not forsake Palestine, and they will not appease the empire and allow it to remain the hegemon of West Asia. So, come what may, the Iranians will remain in charge of the Strait of Hormuz. Perhaps Trump will use some deal between Iran and Oman to claim some sort of victory, but have no doubt Iran will not do an agreement with Oman that concedes Iran's authority and Iran's status over the entire strait. But I don't think he'll do that. I think that Trump is incapable of finding a way out of this. The fact that he comes out every couple of days and makes new threats basically traps him. It prevents him from seeking or from being able to use any potential off ramp. There are off ramps that he could use. He could pull back and claim victory and say that he's done tremendous damage to Iran and brought its, that sort of nonsense, destroyed its nuclear program, destroyed its military infrastructure, its navy, its air force, and Iran is on its knees. And he could talk nonsense and then walk away, and his cult followers will probably continue to support him as long as the U.S. economy doesn't collapse, which, it's going down pretty fast. But as long as he is able to, maintain some minimum in the United States. I think his cult following, they don't care what he does. They'll just follow him no matter where he goes and what he does. So, but he won't do that. And the Zionists won't let him. His ego won't let him. His stupidity won't let him, in my opinion. But we'll have to wait and see. So he's trapped. He's trapped himself. But we'll have to wait and see what happens.
One of the reasons that he somehow backed down is the way that Iran can retaliate. And the retaliation, let's assume Donald Trump is preparing for war, the way that he was talking about, yeah, I'm attacking power grids, infrastructure, I'm going to destroy everything in Iran. And then later on, he said that Saudi Arabia, all these Middle Eastern countries, together with Iran, they're calling him and begging not to attack Iran. And was there any sort of call, any sort of talk between Iran and the United States before Donald Trump canceling the attack? Iran somehow begging the United States or telling the United States something. What was that?
I would be surprised if any one of your viewers by now thought that there was any communication between Iran and the United States. Because your viewers are obviously people who know what's going on. And I'm not offering a great deal of knowledge to them. Many of them, I'm sure, if they were on your show, they could say all this, everything that I'm saying, probably, and they'd be able to add some things that I wouldn't know or be able to remember for this show. So of course not, definitely not. There's no communication, and this is not the first time. He's been making this claim so many times that it's just boring listening to him. And I don't even think his cult following believes it, but they'll just follow him anyway. That 30% or 32% or 33% of the American public who are MAGA, he can, what was it that he once said many years ago? He said, I could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and my supporters would continue to support me. That's how they are. He said that, I think, in 2000, about almost a decade ago, I think. But it's true even today. So it doesn't matter if he's lying or not for them, unless the ship begins to sink. And I think, Nima, the situation is dangerous. Look at what's happening in Japan, and all of these things are linked to the crisis. I mean, people wonder why the price of oil has not gone up so much. Part of it is manipulation, of course. Part of it is this is not the spot. We have to keep an eye on the spot market, what the real oil costs. But also the issue is that there's a huge shortage of refined oil because of all the damage done, and because the Strait of Hormuz is closed, because of the tax on Russia, because of the Chinese preventing exports. So the shortage works at multiple levels, and of course there are other products that come from the Persian Gulf that are going to create huge damage that we are creating huge damage that we're not seeing yet. Helium, fertilizers, or we're not noticing. We know they're happening. It's already causing inflation, but people don't notice the link. But the events in Japan, I think, are very dangerous. Red light. It's a red light that's flashing, I'm sure, for Trump's team. But in any case, the Iranians are going to continue to remain steadfast. The Iranians are not going to relinquish the Strait of Hormuz, come what may. If the United States launches an all-out war, Iran will fight that all-out war, but Iran will not give up the Strait of Hormuz. That's just a final decision that's been made.
If the United States decides to do something big in Iran, what would be the Iranian? Because recently, in the last 2 days, 3 days, everybody was asking what would be the Iranian response to that sort of attack? Who's going to be the target, and what are the targets on the part of Iranians?
Well, Fars News Agency has pretty good access, and my advice is for your viewers to join their Telegram channel and to translate their. I don't know if they have an English Telegram channel. I'm sure they do, but the Persian one is obviously more detailed. But I'd look at their translations if they are that interested in keeping up with events. If they're not, I mean, your show is more, is quite good in your different guests, and but if they want like the details, then they should like daily details, hourly details, minute by minute details, like General Rezai's interview that you alluded to last night. They can go to like the Fars News Agency or Tasnim or the others. But Fars News Agency put out this list of refineries and oil and gas installations across the Persian Gulf that would be the initial targets, and they were key assets of Saudi Arabia and the others. So that was basically that. They are well connected. And I'm not saying that that is the only list, or, but it's sending a message that look, we're going to destroy everything you have. If you target our electricity, we'll target your electricity, because first of all, the United States has a presence in all these countries, and the United States continues to have a presence in Kuwait, contrary to what they're trying to imply. They have a strong presence in Bahrain, contrary to what they're implying in the media, and they have a strong presence in northern Iraq. They moved some things around, and some key assets were removed from these areas, but they have a strong presence. No one should have any doubt that think that they just left the region. That's nonsense. So, since the Americans are there, those installations are key to the U.S. presence. But also, so if there's no electricity in Kuwait, U.S. forces in Kuwait or U.S. forces in Qatar or in the Emirates or in Saudi Arabia, they won't be able to maintain a presence. I mean, they can use, some. They can stay around using their own capabilities for a while, but it's not sustainable. You cannot just, maintain a military presence with a few with small generators and constantly using fuel to fill them up. So if the power plants in these countries are destroyed, that's devastating for the U.S. armed forces. But also, all these countries are complicit in this war. We've gone over this multiple times. Your viewers know this. These countries are collaborators in this war. At the beginning of the war, they were willing collaborators. They thought that they were on the winning team. They made a bad choice. They were on the losing side. Now, they may grumble today and beg Trump not to continue the war, but they haven't kicked him out of their country. They haven't kicked the American forces out. Grumbling, but allowing the Americans to use their territory to fire rockets and missiles, or to bomb Iran, or to refuel fighter jets. That's war. That's an act of war. So if Trump does carry out the threat, as we've discussed before, the Iranian response will be decisive. And whether it's in these countries or the Israeli regime, all-out war will mean that Iran will treat the Americans very differently. And we already see how precise Iranian missiles and drones are. Ever since the United States restarted the war, we saw how devastating Iran's drones and missiles are. And there's no ceasefire for Iran. After the United States stopped, Iran struck them. And in Kuwait, they're still striking them. And in northern Iraq, they're striking their proxies and probably U.S. assets too.
You've said that Saudi Arabia is sending messages telling the people that they're not behind the attack on Iraqi government, on the part of the Iraqi government and the Iraqi army. If, in your opinion, are they getting to the point to understand that there would be no deal in the West Asia without considering the total removal of the siege on Yemen. For example, Yemen is so important. They know, I assume they're under tremendous pressure because of the Strait of Hormuz, together with the Bab el-Mandab, the way that Yemen is controlling everything. We've seen in recent days how they just block everything, that goes in and comes out. And this is, are they getting to the point to understand that and to put their differences aside, or maybe normalizing the situation with Yemen?
They have no option. Otherwise this war will continue. There won't be an agreement between Iran and the United States without the issue of Yemen, Lebanon, and Gaza being resolved in one form or another. And in the case of Lebanon, the Israeli regime has to go completely, and the war has to end completely. No more assassinations, nothing. In the case of Yemen, the siege has to end. In the case of Gaza, despite the problems that I explained earlier, there has to be some sort of solution. And then, of course, Iran's stolen assets have to be handed over, and Iran's control over the Strait of Hormuz will be intact. So there won't be peace. I mean, Iran is not going, even if Trump walks away today, he says, okay, I've won the war and I'm going back, and the Navy can go home, and all those thousands of soldiers who are stuck in this horrific weather in the Indian Ocean and the Red Sea and the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman and in the Arabian Peninsula, they can all go home and meet their families. Even if he says that, the Strait of Hormuz is not going to be normalized, nor will the Bab el-Mandab Strait be normalized. The issues have to be resolved.
Last night, we've learned from the military advisor to Iran's Supreme Leader Mohsen Rezai. He said that right now no ceasefire exists, and which is important, because yesterday, as you mentioned, Iran attacked Kuwait and attacked the American bases in northern part of Iraq, if we can put it this way, or in Iraqi Kurdistan. These are two important points. I would say Iraqi Kurdistan was, from what we've seen so far, Iranian operations on that region, attack with missiles, drones. Even yesterday, we've learned that 14 ground operations were done, Iranian ground forces, special forces in that area, because of the huge concern of these, terrorist groups in Iraqi Kurdistan. What is the situation there? And is there still any sort of, are they bringing more weapons to these people to help them to do something in that area?
Yes, they're well armed. The Americans have given them their full support. And one of the things that is very important is that the local Kurdish government in Erbil, they're allowing this to happen. All these bases that these terror groups have, that these Israeli and American proxies have, they're all known entities, and they're allowed to build all these bases with the consent of the Kurdish regime in Erbil city. But if these groups carry out an assault on Iran, Iran will be unforgiving, and Iran will demand that the Iraqi government deal with this while the Iranian armed forces deal with it. And I think that will bring about an end to the Erbil regime. So they have to be careful. They're in a dangerous position, just like the Kuwaiti regime, just like the Emirati regime, just like the Qatari and Saudi regime, and so on, and the Bahraini regime. They can't wage war against Iran, or allow someone else to wage war from their territory and pretend that they're innocent bystanders, or that they are neutral and they have nothing to do with this. No, that's impossible. We had this discussion a few months ago when the war began, and Iran began striking back at these regimes, and they were complaining, "Why is Iran attacking us?" It's like saying that, let's say the Russians or the Chinese or someone else or the Brazilians, they have bases in Canada and Mexico, and then they start bombing the United States from all those bases. And then Canada and Mexico says, they say to the United States that we're neutral, it's none of our business, don't have any, don't retaliate against us. No one in the United States is going to accept that argument. No sane person would accept that argument. And so to claim that they're neutral, whether it's the local government in Erbil, or whether it's the regimes in the Persian Gulf, or it's Jordan, that's an intelligence. That's an insult to our intelligence.
Yeah. The other point that was mentioned by Mohsen Rezai says that under no circumstances will we allow a second corridor to be opened in the Strait of Hormuz. And even if an American warship tries to pass through, will hit it. And this is the point right now in the ongoing negotiations between Iran and Oman. I know that you're not totally aware of what's going on, but from your understanding, from your point of view, and it's going to be two routes in going in and getting out, and which are both of them are they're going to be controlled by Iranian forces. Is that the concept?
I can't speak of the detail because it's ongoing, and I'm not up to speed on the details, and it could have changed. But what is important is that the Strait of Hormuz will be fully controlled by Iran, or fully controlled by Iran and Oman. But it's not going to be Iran controls one part of the strait, Oman controls another, and Oman can do things without Iran's knowledge, or vice versa, or at least let's say Oman. No, let's not include Iran in this. Oman cannot do things without without Iran's knowledge. That's not going to happen. The strait from beginning to end will be fully monitored by Iran, fully controlled by Iran. Nothing will happen in the strait that runs against Iran's interests. No ship can pass through without Iran having consent. All ships will have to pay a fee, no matter what the structure is with regards to the strait, of the management of the strait.
Yeah. Benjamin Netanyahu said that the Middle East is no longer what it once was. Iran is no longer what it once was. It has been subjected to very strong blows. It still has capabilities, but look at the past month, it hasn't fired any missile at us. The change that has happened in the Middle East, in the eyes of Benjamin Netanyahu, we know what's going on with his ongoing fight inside Israel. That's why he needs to picture that. But in the eyes of Iranians, how has the face of the Middle East been changed during the war and as time goes by with the current situation?
Well, this madman is also saying that Israel is the second most important country with regards to artificial intelligence. So either the United States, or more importantly, China, has been surpassed by this regime. No one should take him seriously. He's also a serial liar, and he's been unable to even take Gaza. He's been unable to defeat Hezbollah. He's been unable to defeat Yemen, and of course, he's been defeated by Iran. And we know why Iran has not struck the Israeli regime during the past few weeks. First of all, the fight was over the Strait of Hormuz. And for Iran, it has to win in the Strait of Hormuz. So that's the focus. The focus is on the United States and all those assets of the United States that are fighting to take the Strait of Hormuz from the Iranian people. So that's Iran's priority. Second of all, Iran during this period has been destroying all of those radar systems and all those air defense systems, those layers that the United States has created to help the Israeli regime, whether in northern Iraq or across the Persian Gulf or in Jordan and to the west of Saudi Arabia. So in future, when there is war between Iran and the Zionist regime, it's going to be blind. Of course, the radar, U.S. radar stations in Turkey exist. The United States will continue to obviously do what it can, but it's not going to be like before. And third, while Iran does not initiate strikes, I mean, the Israelis would, that's a general ideological belief. And some say that in this recent battle with the United States, Iran carried out preemptive strikes. That's not really the case. There was never a ceasefire. Just because the Americans stopped and said we've stopped, that doesn't dictate terms to Iran. There is no ceasefire as we speak, and I think General Rezai said that, or someone said that just a few hours ago.
Yeah, he said that. General Rezai said that.
Yeah, so there's no ceasefire between us and the United States for us to be attacking preemptively. No, they constantly carry out, initiate war, they initiate escalation, but there was no ceasefire. And so the Iranians continue to strike the U.S. targets wherever they see that it's a threat to Iran or there's a threat emerging from it. So Iran is not preemptive. These are not preemptive attacks. These are, but in general, Iran does not initiate conflict. That's, ideologically speaking, it's very difficult for Iran. Even though, as I said, we don't have a ceasefire though with the United States, and the siege itself is an act of. But I think the most important issue right now for Iran is the elections in Israel. And the Iranians see that there's a crisis inside Israel. That's why that's why Netanyahu is saying all this nonsense. The regime has lost the war. Israelis know they lost the war. The polls show that they know they lost the war. But Iran wants to see this crisis play out over the next few weeks. If the Israeli regime strikes Iran, and that's possible because Netanyahu wants to escape this quite plausible defeat, then Iran will hit very hard, much harder than during the 40-day hot war, much harder, so that the population of the Israeli regime recognizes what Netanyahu has done to them. But I don't think that Iran wants to start it because it could cause this, people to rally around Netanyahu. Not that his opponents are any better; they're all genocidal. It's a genocidal people. It's clear as day. But seeing Netanyahu struggle like this is a good thing. So Iran will wait to see what the regime does, but the regime lost. Netanyahu can say all he wants, even ordinary Israelis in the polling that's taken place, overwhelmingly. I think it's like near 90% acknowledge this. So he can say that they're the top country when it comes to AI, they're the top country when it comes to everything else on this planet, but the reality is quite different. The important thing is that Iran's underground missile cities, they are what hold the barbarians back, whether it's the American armed forces or the Israeli regime. And as we speak, Iran is producing more advanced missiles. As we're speaking, the Iranians are producing more advanced drones. And basically, the drones that you see that are being fired, these are almost all old, very old drones that the Iranians were building over the years. And they've been very effective. So the Iranians don't feel the need at the moment to start using newer generations of drones.
What is the ongoing? I assume that Iran is receiving messages from the United States. Yesterday, we were somehow thinking of what is that. There were some rumors in the news that the United States is asking Iran to talk about, and even Donald Trump himself pointed out that it's a nuclear program. We have to do something with the nuclear program of Iran. Just in the beginning, in the first step of the talks or negotiations, whatever that would be. And the Iranian position would remain the same as it was before during the MOU?
That's right, yes. Iran is not going to initiate any talks until the United States changes its posture completely, and it will not accept anything less than the MOU. And the nuclear program is not going to be what is discussed at the beginning of the negotiations. And every day that goes by, the Iranian demands only increase because the failure of the United States increases. Even if the United States intensifies, Iran will ensure that it loses. If they strike 5 power plants, Iran will destroy 50. It will, each of these countries that are assisting the United States, they will be punished. And this is not a winnable war for the United States. So Iran will hit back very hard. We saw a bit of this during the 40 days. We all recall when they struck Iran's gas field, the South Pars gas field. The Iranians hit back very hard, and they had warned that they would do so beforehand. They warned they would. The Iranians don't like destroying anything. They don't want to destroy anything in Kuwait or Saudi Arabia. Iran didn't start this war. Iran didn't escalate. Iran constantly warned them not to go down this route. But when the U.S. and the Israelis began to make threats against Iran's critical infrastructure and struck a couple of places, the Iranians said, "You do this, and we'll hit back hard." Iran hit back much harder when they struck Iran's gas field. In other words, the Iranian response is much bigger when it comes to escalation than the initial act of escalation. And so they will swiftly recognize that they made a bad mistake if Trump escalates. But in any case, whether he escalates or not, or whether he backs down, the Iranian position in relative terms is stronger than it was when the MOU was agreed upon and signed. So Iran's demands will be more than the MOU. And not just more than the MOU, it'll be the way in which the MOU is implemented would be different. In other words, Iran will not do anything until the United States actually carries out commitments. So every day that goes by, it makes things worse for the United States. And some people are saying that this war the United States may carry it on for years until the end of the Trump presidency. I'm not sure about that, because I think that the global economy, when it begins to collapse, and again, we can see these rumblings in Tokyo, when the global economy begins to collapse, I don't think it will be sustainable for the United States to continue this when it collapses. So, and that's where we're going. Apparently, Trump does not have the will to pull out of this war before calamity strikes. So, when the global economy falls, and we don't know when it will be, but it will happen, then I think the United States will have to pull out. I don't think the American people will tolerate it anymore, even if the United States carries out a false flag operation. And that is something that I think is quite possible for the Israeli regime in the United States. Carry out a major cyber attack and blame it on Iran, carry out a major attack on civilians in the United States and blame it on Iran to mobilize, if not the entire American people, but the MAGA base. When the global economy, even the false flag operation, I don't think is going to do the trick, because when the global economy collapses, I think even MAGA will collapse.
What has happened with Yemen that they decided to confront Saudi Arabia and the United States? And whenever they're talking about these are proxies of Iran, and we have to understand what is the nature, what is the reality between Iran and Yemen, between Iran and Hezbollah. The same thing is happening in southern Lebanon. Israel is attacking and just destroying some parts of southern Lebanon and some villages, cities, and Ali Tahir, mountains were, hit by, missiles. Just in the last 2 days, they were hitting large areas with missiles. And this is the question: is Iran going to tell Hezbollah what to do, or it's all about Hezbollah and they're, sort of policy and decision when it comes to confrontation with Israel? What is that?
The major problem in the West is just like they underestimate Iran. They don't understand Iran's sophistication, how sophisticated Iran is. It's how its defense doctrine, how sophisticated it is, how its military industry, how sophisticated it is, how sophisticated the state institutions are, how steadfast and how politically aware its people are. They don't understand the relationship between Iran and these entities. They don't understand that Hezbollah is not a proxy. Whenever you hear they say Iran's proxies, you can tell that they don't know what they're talking about. As soon as they say proxy, you have to start ignoring them or taking what they say with a grain of salt at least. These are not proxies, these are allies. They have agency, they have strong motivation, they're resilient, they're resistant. They have they believe in what they're doing. And that's what makes Hezbollah so strong. That's what makes Ansarullah and the Yemeni armed forces so strong. Lebanon will be liberated. First of all, there won't be a deal between Iran and the United States without these changes taking place. We already discussed this. But in the case of Yemen, the Saudis brought this upon themselves. Things have been becoming more and more complicated because Yemen has gradually been becoming more angry that the Saudis will not end the siege on Yemeni women and children. And the West is fine with it. These Arab regimes and all those regimes who we're told are joining this Saudi coalition, they support the Saudi regime, but they'll do nothing for Gaza. That just that says everything. That says more than enough for each and every one of their apologists. But all those regimes who allegedly are joining this coalition, if this is true, they want the Saudis to be able to continue to enforce a siege on Yemen, just like Gaza. So again, it just tells us who they are. It's really unforgivable. But and it will fail. Yemen will not be defeated by any Saudi coalition, which would be a sub-coalition, a subordinate to the Epstein coalition. And I hope no country in this region really takes part in this. Saudis may be lying. We'll have to see what happens in the days and weeks ahead. So I don't want to accuse anyone, because just because the Saudis have named them, that doesn't mean anyone has joined. But in any case, the point is that Yemen has been increasingly angry and saying that this is intolerable. But the Saudis, when they bombed Yemen's Sana'a International Airport, that was the straw that broke the camel's back. And they bombed the airport as an Iranian passenger airliner was landing because they wanted to enforce a siege on Yemen. So they enforced a siege on the sea and by air. That's barbaric, and they've been doing it for years. Yemen said after this airstrike that enough is enough, and they began striking back. Then the Saudis went and bombed the port. First they bombed the airport, then the port. Why? Because they want to isolate Yemen to prevent food from coming in, to prevent the industry to grow. They want to make people miserable. So now Yemen is saying, okay, you make us miserable, we'll make you miserable. And this is the best time to do it. The Saudis initiated the conflict, and the Strait of Hormuz is closed. So that makes their closure of the Bab al-Mandeb all the more effective, because the Saudis have no options. So Yemen is determined to end the siege, and Iran supports it completely. Iran's position has always been that, look, the Saudis, it's been telling the Saudis to find a solution with Yemen. It's the Saudis who refuse to do so because they're determined to make Yemen submissive to Saudi Arabia. It's not going to happen, especially with Ansarullah. It's impossible. Ansarullah is like Hezbollah. They're not going to be supported. We saw that along with Hezbollah and Iran, that they were the only entity that supported the Palestinian people, and they paid a huge price. The Americans attacked them, waged war against them, and failed. They're not going to be subordinate to Saudi.
Is Iran seeking dominance in the region as an outcome of this war, or something else is happening in the mind of Iranians?
When Saddam Hussein was overthrown by the Americans. By the way, Iran, when neighboring countries, Turkey under Erdogan and the Persian Gulf, they were all supporting the overthrow, or at least they assisted the United States. The Iranians were the only country that did not cooperate, and Iran officially opposed it. As a citizen, I was a part of the anti-war coalition in the UK. I was in the protests against the war. So sometimes you see these people online talking nonsense and saying Iran supported the United States in Iraq. That's nonsense. That was not the case. The Iranians oppose it completely. But Iran took that opportunity to undermine the United States. All of those Iraqis that were in Iran encouraged to go back into Iraq and to gradually undermine U.S. authority there, and they were successful. So, but when Saddam fell, Iran could have said, okay, we're going to take control over this territory or that territory now that Iran, in compensation for Saddam's war against Iran. Did Iran do that? As we speak, Nima, I don't know right now because of the strikes on Iran and some of the problems Iran may have with electricity and natural gas. But I mean, at the moment, we don't lose electricity. But some problems exist, so exports may be more difficult. Iran exports electricity to Iraq and gas, and the Iraqi government, because of the threats by the United States, does not pay for it. So Iran, despite all the sanctions, is helping the Iraqi people. And every time people in the government want to cut this or decrease it because of the problems at home, Ayatollah Khamenei always said, look, the people of Iraq are under pressure. They don't have electricity. Keep the gas and electricity flowing. So Iran never took anything from Iraq. Iran never took compensation. According to the Resolution 598 in the UN Security Council, Iraq would pay compensation to Iran because the UN Secretary General said that Iraq was the aggressor. But Iran never took anything from Iraq and actually helps Iraq. Iran many of its young men were martyred in the fight against ISIS and the liberation of Iraq. So Iran has no ambitions, but the West likes to project their own characteristics on Iran. Iran has no bases in Yemen. Iran has no economic ambitions in Yemen, nor in Lebanon, nor in Afghanistan. I mean, one of the interesting things, and I've said this before, I don't know if I've said this on your show, but in Syria, Iran fought against ISIS and Al Qaeda, and rightly so. And so these, like the Saudis and the Qataris and Erdogan and the Emirates and their propaganda machine, they would say this is a sectarian war. The Iranians are supporting. Iran never cared about Assad. I mean, Assad's wife was Sunni, but Iran didn't care if he was Alawite or Sunni, Shia or Christian or Druze or Kurd. It didn't matter to Iran. The issue was that the Americans were opposed to him. He was no saint. His government was wasn't a government that was ideal to Iran, but it was like in Cuba. Iran supports Cuba. Iran supported Venezuela, and hopefully one day the Venezuelans will rise up. But Iran supported Syria because of the U.S. empire, the Zionists trying to undermine it. So it's a war against the empire. Iran sacrificed for Syria. It didn't gain anything, but it wanted to keep the axis of resistance strong. So those people who were saying this is sectarian, they were talking nonsense. What's the evidence? I often say Bosnia, for example, Iran saved Bosnia, Sunnis. But most importantly, in Afghanistan, and this is something that Iran, the Taliban, when the first generation of the Taliban, they were brutal and they were genocidal, and they slaughtered Iranians in Mazar Sharif. and they slaughtered minorities. But after 9/11, and when the U.S. went and overthrew Al Qaeda, and then back then I thought, in Iran, everyone thought that Al Qaeda did 9/11, and it was just them, and they took claim for it. Years later, it gradually emerged that the situation, 9/11 was much more complicated than that. And I think probably Iran's reaction would have been very different if they had known that. And anyway, I back then I used to ignore people who would say that 9/11, those people were dancing in New York and all those other things. I mean, people should go and watch Tucker Carlson's documentary on 9/11, and they'll know that it wasn't just these people. I mean, these tools were used just as they were used in Syria, just as they were used in Libya, and so on, but it wasn't just them. So in any case, in Afghanistan, the first generation of the Taliban were brutal, but after the Americans took over, a new generation came. And even though Iran has huge differences with them over women's rights, over schools and education, but in any case, Iran began supporting them. Who got angry with Iran? Many Tajiks, the Persian speakers, many Shias, many Uzbeks, those who were victims of the Taliban, or who were, but Iran was saying that the chief evil is the empire. Whether it's Syria, whether it's Iraq, whether it's Afghanistan, whether it's Palestine, whether it's in Venezuela, whether it's in Cuba, it's the empire. If the empire is defeated, all these issues can be much more easily resolved among them. So Iran supported the Taliban. So, if anyone says, why did Iran do this? Iran did the same thing in Afghanistan. So, no, Iran doesn't have any ambitions beyond its own borders. Its borders are big enough. It's big enough, and there's enough mismanagement in this country as it is. Managing this, they're not doing a tremendous job in managing the economic and social and cultural affairs of this country. It's not an ideal situation. So Iran has more than enough territory. I mean, it has exactly what it needs, and that's how it will remain.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Professor.
Iran has just launched a drone strike at least one U.S. airbase in Kuwait. 3 drones striking into this U.S. airbase. Also, Iran struck a cargo ship in the Strait of Hormuz. Also, Iran announcing it shut down an MQ-9 Reaper as well that was flying in the region. This, as Donald Trump has been lying and saying Iran is begging to make a deal. Trump said, I was going to decapitate them and I was going to launch an attack that would be even more massive than the biggest attack in World War II. Essentially, Trump threatening to use nuclear bombs against Iran. Well, Iran has responded, and let's just go through what just has taken place in the past 12 hours. So Iran struck a cargo ship northeast of Al-Qasab, right in Oman. This is the second strike within 24 hours on a vessel attempting to pass through the so-called U.S.-backed southern route in the Strait of Hormuz. UK MTO confirming this incident with that tanker, with that ship broadcasting on VHF 16, Mayday, Mayday. It's been hit by a projectile, and Saipan Navy, IRGC, was warning, do not use that route. And Donald Trump having fake negotiations with nobody. And Iran is upping the ante and saying, we know that you've run out of your Patriot interceptors. We know you've run out of your THAAD interceptors and you have no Navy destroyers. Don't you dare threaten us with decapitation. You will see we will project strength and go on the offense and show that the U.S. security umbrella in the region is gone. Iran state media, both Fars and Tasnim, reporting these explosion and fires at least one U.S. base, though it looks like multiple bases in Kuwait have been struck. And we know a lot of those bases have already been abandoned by the United States with most of its equipment because there's no more interceptors. There's no more THAADs to protect it. And Iran has been just pounding those bases, both with drones and with ballistics. So yeah, Fars reported this. And Tasnim saying multiple sources are reporting a new series of very powerful explosions in northern Kuwait. According to initial reports, at least one U.S. base, maybe multiple, were directly hit. That's also now being reported by other media outlets. J-Post, I-24 in Israel, confirming these strikes as well. We've also learned that the IRGC say that they shot down an MQ-9 Reaper drone over the Strait of Hormuz. As this account, Just Dario, says, this is how Iran answers Trump threatening them, that they have one more chance to sign a deal or else you will be decapitated. Iran saying, we ain't having any negotiations with you right now. There is no ceasefire, and we are going to continue to pummel your bases in the region. Other news to report, and Iran is well aware of this. Remember, I probably have sounded like a broken record talking about these strategic petroleum reserves over and over again. Well, I haven't forgot about that. So we got the latest readout on those SPR, the Strategic Petroleum Reserve readings. The U.S. Strategic Petroleum Reserve is now down to 304.8 million barrels, and no amount of Trump talks or Bessent manipulation can refill it. The lower this goes, the harder crude oil prices will be to manipulate. And when the draw is forced to stop at some point below the 300 million barrel threshold, it's game over. Period. It's what we've been warning about. Now, this Lucas Akemi account, he's been making some good observations lately that are worth sharing with you. And you know, I'm a chart geek, a data geek, and he seems to be as well. So oil prices, because of Trump and Bessent's paper manipulation, that crude market out there may be down 9%. But Brent for prompt delivery is up 20%, meaning the actual delivery of the crude up 20%, while the paper market, which is often what's reported, is down. So the market is paying a $13 premium for oil now rather than 6 months from now. In other words, they are flooding the market with paper barrels while physical barrels remain in short supply. Recall, earlier today, we were reporting what was going on Iran media. So these developments should not shock you for watching the Midas Touch Network. And I know you don't fall for the corporate news propaganda where they're like, Donald Trump said that he expects there to be a deal with Iran any day now, and that Iran came begging back to ask Donald Trump, and he was prepared to unleash hell upon them. You all know that that's phony, that's market manipulation. And by the way, Trump is now selling early access to Truth Social, $100,000 to Wall Street firms if they want access to his posts so he can help them with insider trading. Senior Iranian official Moshe Rezi, as we reported earlier today, he's a special advisor right now to the Ayatollah Mojtaba. He says, if the United States maintains the naval blockade, we will create serious risks for American warships. He also said the following: "We are not having any discussions with Donald Trump." He directly rejected Trump's new claim that the Strait of Hormuz will also be open in the coming 12 to 24 hours, saying Iran will not now, not ever allow any route other than Iran's route to open in the Strait of Hormuz. Even if the U.S. brings an aircraft carrier into the illegal route of the Strait of Hormuz, we will target it. This comes 1 hour after Donald Trump claimed that he is talking about having the strait completely open by literally tomorrow. He literally lies about everything. After all, he's reflecting pool boy. He's the guy who frames two-time Olympic canoeists with vandalism in the reflecting pool. He's cover-up child sex trafficking, Epstein files person. He is himself a sexual predator and deviant found liable for sexual. He is a real sicko. Other news to report as well. Iran's foreign ministry spokesperson said the following: "Our Chinese friends are using their efforts to prevent the escalation of the situation, but we don't want a new mediator." Pakistan is the mediator for discussions related to Iran and the United States. Qatar also provides assistance. We have friendly relations with China, and China shares our concerns about the escalation of U.S. confrontational behavior and is worried about insecurity in the region. Let me translate that for you. China is telling the United States, you escalate, we will get involved, and you will have World War III on your hands. Iran is our partner economically, politically, militarily. Wang Yi, Chinese foreign minister, has made that abundantly clear. Now, you also have on state regime media, Fox, General Jack Keane going on a little bit earlier, and he is out there ripping the Saudis for not being willing to take casualties and damage to some of their oil reserves, and telling Donald Trump not to strike Iran and escalate as Donald Trump threatened he would. Let me show you what General Keane, retired General Keane, said before. Let's play it.
So what's going on with the Saudis? The fact of the matter is the Saudis are not willing to sacrifice to rid the Middle East region of Iran's aggression. That is the absolute fact that we're seeing playing out here. What do I mean by sacrifice? Casualties and the damage to some of their oil reserves. That's the reality that's taking place here. They're willing for us to make that sacrifice for sure. They're willing for Israel to make that sacrifice for sure. That's despite the fact that they've been under a nuclear and security umbrella since World War II, despite the fact that the United States led a coalition to stop Saddam Hussein from taking Saudi oil fields after they took the Kuwaiti oil fields, and we liberated them. Despite the fact that after the Saudi government killed Khashoggi, the Trump administration certainly wire-brushed them for that, but still maintain a relationship with this kingdom. And I think this is shameful that they lack the spine to stand up for their people and for the region here and support the president on what is taking place.
Now, if you've been following the Midas Touch Network, you know we've been discussing with you what Iran's strategy is. Iran is not afraid of escalation because Iran knows what we know, what propaganda TV in the U.S. won't really tell you. That is, the U.S. is out of weapons, okay? And the Arab Dome in the area doesn't exist. There's still an Iron Dome in Israel. And what Iran realizes is that if Donald Trump does escalate, that will cause global economic catastrophe, and it will absolutely cause a Great Depression in the United States. Iran knows it has Donald Trump cornered like the little pathetic rat that he is. They know his fake discussions with them and stuff. I'm going to blow him up. It's just projected weakness. Iran views Trump as a pathetic, weak little rat that they could stomp on. Such is what has happened to the United States with this war criminal regime in power that is weak and pathetic and run by someone who's been a lifelong bankrupter. It is sad to see this as an American. What has become of CENTCOM? What has become of the United States military under this regime of Hegseth, Trump, and other war criminals? And I say this as a patriotic American. To me, the ultimate patriotism is condemning this regime of terrorists and war criminals. Earlier today, Donald Trump had a deranged press conference where he behaved very creepy with the women behind him. And Donald Trump was like, Iran called me. They called me. There'd be nothing left if I attacked him. They know this, so they called me and they begged. No, they didn't. Play this clip.
So they called me and they said, please don't attack. We'll make a deal. That's the real truth. And everyone knows it. And who wouldn't call? And they found out through leaks and sleazebags, a lot of sleazebags, leakers. Leakers should be put in jail. They have to strengthen up the laws for leakers. But in this case, leakers helped because they said the severity of the attack. And Iran knew it. They knew what was coming. It was going to come last night, and it would have gone on for a long time. And there'd be essentially very little left. There'd be nothing left. And if I am given a chance to let a lot of people live, I want to give that chance.
And then the reporter says to him, this is the 5th time you turned off airstrikes. What's your message to the American people about what the hell you're doing? And Donald Trump's like, well, I wanted to give him one more shot before I decapitate him. Notice that his language just gets increasingly unhinged. I'm going to blow the effing S out of him. I'm going to decapitate them. And Iran's like, do what you want to do. We're prepared to fight until the death. Here, play this clip of Trump.
Mr. President, this is at least the 5th time you turned off airstrikes against Iran since April to negotiate. What is your message to the American people who are wondering what has changed this time? Why should it be different?
Well, you don't know. I don't know. I think we're going to maybe get something, but I want to give them every last chance before decapitation. Very tough to do what we have planned, still planned. We'll see what happens. But it's a very, very tough thing to do. I think I'm very proud of the fact that I'll give people a chance. This is a big move. To do an attack that big on a country, I'd rather not do it. Now, we've already, through lots of large attacks, but they were normal large. Hopefully they'll come to their senses because what happened cannot have a nuclear weapon.
Well, there you have it, folks. Let me know what you think about all of this. Hit subscribe. Let's get to 7. Donald Trump is fully surrendering to Iran right now, waving the white flag. He's no longer even demanding that Iran do a deal with the United States. Remember, deal, deal, deal. He's saying, Iran, you better make a deal with Oman in the next 24 hours or else we will decapitate you. You better make a deal with Oman. Well, Iran has been trying to make the deal with Oman, whereby Iran fully controls the Strait of Hormuz. More on that in just a moment. At the same time, Reuters is reporting that the situation regarding the U.S. precision munitions is even worse than previously reported. It really isn't simply a matter of dwindling precision munitions. It's like the United States has basically run out of all precision munitions. And if there were to be any other conflict in the world, be it in China or elsewhere, the United States does not have the munitions and military equipment to even participate in a war. So not only has Donald Trump destroyed the so-called Arab security umbrella that he promised, he's destroyed the U.S. security umbrella all over the world. The United States has become yet another Trump casino, utterly and totally bankrupt, or a Trump dystopian reality show where we're all non-consensual participant members in this sicko reality show, and we just want to get out of this like it's some escape room. Take a look at the latest. Trump told Iran, this is what he said today, you better finalize a Strait of Hormuz deal with Oman by the end of business on Tuesday, or you will face devastating airstrikes. I want to give them every last chance before decapitation, he told Bloomberg. You'll find out today or tomorrow, will they make a deal with Oman? Okay, well, Iran's plan with Oman regarding the Strait of Hormuz would grant Iran total authority over all inbound maritime traffic, a senior Iranian official told Reuters. Additionally, under the proposed arrangement, Oman would clear outbound vessels only after notifying Iranian officials, assuring Tehran retains visibility and the option to intervene, in essence, full control over the Strait of Hormuz. The senior source said Iran is unlikely to accept an alternative to this deal to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. So Donald Trump's brilliant deal making is, Iran, you just make a deal with Oman because I am incapable of doing a deal and I want to just say the word deal, 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 deal. So you do a deal together. Let's go to this Reuters reporting. I'm going to show you too, because Rubio, pathetic little Marco Rubio is out there saying, well, we think that there is some progress between Iran and Oman right now. Okay, well, y'all aren't involved in this. I mean, how crazy. Like, we know that Donald Trump steals everything. He's going to try to steal credit for the deal between Iran and Oman for Iran to control the Strait of Hormuz. I just want you to think about that. That's the outcome. That's the end game right here. Exclusive from Reuters. The U.S. has used virtually all of its precision strike missiles during the war in Iran. Stockpiles on ATACMS and precision strike missiles are almost depleted. And we have used about half our Tomahawks per new data circulating inside the administration. This comes as the United States continues to debate the extent to which it can continue striking Iran without drawing down on the stockpile to levels that would impact readiness for a future conflict. Virtually all. Iran's foreign ministry spokesperson says that the discussions between Iran and Oman have so far been positive at both the technical and political levels, and that Iran is working with Oman to develop the necessary framework for the future management of maritime traffic through the strategic waterway. So what's Rubio saying all about this? Rubio's like, well, there's been some major progress in the talks to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. Major talks right now between Oman and Iran. Here, play this clip.
Nonetheless, I think that there's a conversation and a negotiation that we are involved in between Oman and Iran on how more ships can be able to go through there safely in the short term as we move towards these longer term talks about denuclearization. And suffice it to say, there's been progress made in those talks, but not finality yet. We're hoping that will happen very shortly. Okay, thank you guys.
And then Rubio lies, though, and says lots of ships are moving through the Strait of Hormuz. Really? Like the 2 tankers that tried to use the route without IRGC permission yesterday that were destroyed? How about the Kuwaiti base that was hit by Iran yesterday? Iran is now just pummeling U.S. bases like in Kuwait, and the U.S. doesn't even acknowledge it anymore because the U.S. can't stop it. And Trump can't even escalate if he wants to. So they're just like, let's just pretend it doesn't happen. Here's what Rubio said. Let's play this clip.
Well, one that you see a lot of focus on is the Straits. The Straits, there are ships moving through the Straits. There's oil moving right now through the Straits. So the Straits are open. Nonetheless, I think that there's a conversation and a negotiation that we are involved in between Oman and Iran on how more ships can be able to go through there safely in the short term as we move towards these longer term talks about denuclearization. And suffice it to say, there's been progress made in those talks, but not finality yet. We're hoping that will happen very shortly. Okay.
But then what this is really all about, I know, it's market manipulation for Donald Trump and the oligarchs, right? So you have Treasury Secretary Bessent. He goes on CNBC, a business network, in order to manipulate the markets this morning. And he does. He goes on. He says we're close to a deal. Everything is great. And the markets move on that. The markets ripped as a result of that. Who gets rich? Donald Trump and his right-wing oligarchs from manipulating the market. But here you have Treasury Secretary Bessent saying, because Donald Trump threatened last week that this would be the largest military campaign since World War II, Iran is now in talks with Oman, and that is a really good thing. Here, play this clip right here.
And we've seen President Trump last week threatened what would have been one of the largest military campaigns, or the largest military campaign since World War II, against the Iranians. And now because of that, we are in talks with the Iranians. And I think there is a chance we may have a deal today or tomorrow to open the strait. And
I'm going to threaten you with World War II annihilation, war crimes, but you need to negotiate with Oman. And Iran's like, that's what we've been doing. We've been doing the negotiation with Oman. We are not negotiating with you. That's where we're at. By the way, even CNBC acknowledged the market manipulation. They were like, oil moved pretty drastically after what we just heard from Treasury Secretary Bessent. Play this clip.
Oil moved pretty drastically on what the secretary was saying. He said that we could see an opening. He believes we'll see a deal potentially today or tomorrow to reopen the strait. As a result, take a look at oil prices. WTI moving pretty rapidly. We had been at $82 a barrel earlier this morning. At the top of that interview, we were trading at $80 a barrel. Now it's off by $3.55 to $76.79. That in turn has impacted the futures pretty rapidly as well. The Dow was up by about 300 points earlier this morning. Now you're looking at the Dow up by 513 points. S&P had been negative. It's now indicated up by about 5 points. And the NASDAQ is up even more than it had been earlier at 227 points. We've also got Treasury yields that moved on this, the 30-year in particular. We were looking at a 30-year yield of 525 when the show began at 6 a.m. It's now trading at 521. And in fact, the entire complex had been yielding higher. It's now lower across the board. The 10-year is at 465 and the 2-year is at 422.
How's the Dow?
Dow's up 500 points. It was up 300 before.
Yeah, I saw that. Oh, I saw it was up 500.
You were.
No, it just.
I'm now Dow.
Just announce it again. Yeah.
And then in this kind of chummy and disgusting way, you have CNBC and Bessent just kind of laughing at the idea that Bessent was manipulating the markets at the end of last week as well at Camp David. Remember, he had a notepad and he was like, give $5 to $10 billion to Japan to bail out the yen. By the way, the United States bailing out the Japanese yen as we bailed out Javier Milei in Argentina. But we're bailing out the yen because we're terrified that Japan will sell its treasury bonds, the United States bonds. And so we have to bail out Japan while the American people are suffering. But what they're laughing at us all here, they're like, you wrote it on a notepad that you were going to do $5 to $10 billion to bail out the yen so that the press could see, so that the cameras could take photos. I just wanted the press to make sure they got the symbol right for the yen. Ha 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 ha. I'll tell you what, Bessent, the American people who can't afford groceries and can't afford gas and who can't pay their rent right now, they're not trading the yen. They're not able to long or short the currencies. They're not in this Epstein class world that you occupy, where you manipulate markets and cause, it's despicable stuff. Here, play this clip.
Just got to ask you, you're a sly dog. When you wrote that down, buy 5 to 10 billion, and the printing looked so big. You've done this before, haven't you? Where people are looking over your shoulder. Did you need to be reminded of things to do? Buy 5 to 10 billion in yen. Tell me what was really going on there in this second.
Well, I just wanted to make sure that all the reporters looking over my shoulder also knew the symbol JPY for the Japanese yen. So,
okay.
Instead of shorthand to yourself.
Yeah, I was going to finish the list. The rest of the list was, go and have lunch with the supreme leader play tennis with Putin. But I thought I would just leave it at the buy 5 to 10 billion of Japanese.
And then I'll note this as well. Iran then came out with a statement after what Bessent says. Iran rejects U.S. Treasury Secretary Bessent and Trump's claim that the Strait of Hormuz will open tomorrow under a new deal, saying Iran and Oman Hormuz negotiations held without U.S. participation are aimed at establishing an intermediate corridor that will halt both the current Iran-controlled northern and U.S.-backed southern routes, giving Iran as a coastal state full protected sovereignty interests and national security, they told their local media. Iran adds, Trump has violated his commitments and Iran is moving forward with its plan to establish arrangements in the Strait of Hormuz independently of U.S. threats, and it will succeed. Iran does not shape its interests and priorities based on the schedule or demands of Donald Trump. The agreement with Oman would grant Iran total sovereign authority over all inbound and maritime traffic, with Oman's limited role being to clear outbound vessels, but only after notifying Iranian officials, assuring Iran retains visibility and the option to intervene. Now, with all of that going on, what else are MAGA doing as they're manipulating the markets, as they're destroying Americans' lives, as they're engaged in all this abhorrent behavior? Well, you've got MAGA Republican Congressmember Byron Donalds, who's running for governor in Florida. He says, the Democrats just want chaos. Look what the Democrats did in Minnesota. You mean when y'all invaded with ICE and Border Patrol Gestapo? Anyway, here, play this clip.
What the Democrats want is chaos. The Minneapolis craziness that was brought to us by the Democrat Party. The shutdown of Homeland Security for almost 100 days brought to us by the Democrat Party. TSA lines out of control, Democrat Party. No voter ID in our elections, Democrat Party. Wide open borders under the previous administration, the chaos that brought, Democrat Party. They don't have real policy. Oh, by the way, the crazy inflation that is still hurting so many families, that was brought to us by the Democrat Party, Joe Biden, and their crazy economic.
There you have it, everybody. Hit subscribe. Let's get to 7 million subscribers. Thanks for watching.
Bessner. He is the author of the Imperious Realism Substack, the author of Imperious Realism, the book, which we could show all of you, and the host of the American Prestige podcast. That's a record intro here for a guest. But again, someone I've corresponded with a few times and who really caught my interest with some of his writing and some of his analysis. So thank you very much for joining us, Dan. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. Really happy to be here.
Absolutely. So you've been really lasered in on this theory of imperious realism, which you've developed, kind of the fallout of post-Cold War liberalism and the rise of a new multipolar world. One of the things, topics that we cover pretty extensively here on our show. Just to link it to today's news, let's put this one up here, for example, on the screen, about Iran is said to get some Chinese shoulder-launched missile systems in weeks. Made me think of some of your analysis. This is exactly the same type of tactics the United States undertook during the Cold War against the Soviet Union. But, you know, more generally, maybe give the audience an idea of your framework here around imperious realism, what it means for the United States, and then the future of the world, and connect it here to the Iran situation.
Absolutely. So I think there's something interesting happening in how Americans understand their role in the world and what I would term the American empire. which is this notion that there's really no changing it, that there's really no way to transform the American empire, to transform geopolitics. And I think this is a transformation from how Americans understood their world role as recently as the 1990s, when someone like Madeleine Albright could say on the Today Show that the United States sees further than other countries, which gives us license to act in the world. I think the failures of the global war on terror and also the end of what I would call mass politics, the inability of people to actually affect foreign policy and economic policy and a number of other issue areas, has engendered this cynicism about American power, but this idea that we must nevertheless act in the world, but then we feel guilty about it and don't think that anything could really change. So the way that I think about imperialist realism is that it's easier to imagine the end of the world than it is to imagine the end of the American empire.
Yeah, I mean, fascinating kind of to put it in that perspective, but just break it down more towards the path towards multipolarity and how it fits within that framework.
Sure. So I think this is why it actually matters, because I think that the world is becoming a more multipolar world. The United States was uniquely powerful both after World War II, where it controlled something like half of the world's manufacturing base, had an atomic monopoly, that is a monopoly of atomic weapons, really had the world's only real air force. And the more we learn about the Soviet Union, particularly in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, the more we learned that it was actually incredibly weak, much weaker than Americans could have really known at the time. And then, of course, after the end of the Cold War, the United States was the last remaining superpower. It was really the global hegemon. This was the so-called unipolar moment, which Charles Krauthammer, a term that Charles Krauthammer basically identified. But I think that two things have happened in the last 25 years. One, the United States squandered its global power. You see with the global war on terror and just failure after failure there, whether you're looking at Iraq, Libya, or Afghanistan, just total disintegration of American foreign policy there. And then you also have the Great Recession, which I think has really damaged the United States' global position. And so you have those two things coupled with the quote unquote rise of China, but really the reemergence of China as a major global power, which it was for most of human history, and also the reemergence of Russia as a global power. So you have this new multipolar world. And just to wrap up here, why this is important is that this is precisely the moment where we need to imagine alternatives to American global empire, because this alternative is going to happen. The question is not a matter of if, but when. And the real issue for us in this country is how we manage this transition to multipolarity. Is it going to be violent, or is it going to be not violent?
Mm-hmm.
Daniel, talk a little bit about the shift away from even rhetorical support for the quote unquote liberal international order. So for my entire life, you know, all of our wars and interventions have been framed in these liberal international values. We all know the ways that the American empire has fallen short of that rhetoric, but the rhetoric was deployed. We're going to bring freedom to the Iraqis, et cetera, et cetera. And now between the genocide in Gaza and, you know, the attacks on Iran and the enabling of any number of continued Israeli war crimes, there's really not even a sort of gesture towards that liberal internationalism. You could see it also with just kidnapping Maduro and saying, we're going to take Venezuela. There's no wrapping it in, oh, human rights, and he was a bad guy. It's all just like, no, we want their stuff and we're going to take it and we're going to be overt about it. You write that this is effectively a sign of the times and that we're moving into an era where no longer will there be this sort of overarching ideological frameworks that are used to justify actions in the world. So talk a little bit about what that shift, how that shift is occurring and what it means.
Absolutely. And it's a really important question. So it's perhaps the easiest way to see this is to compare something like the George W. Bush administration's national security strategy with national security strategies. And this is where I think it's interesting from not only the Trump administration, but the Biden administration. When you look back on the war on terror, George W. Bush national security strategies, you see consistent references to democracy promotion being the key to American security. And this, you know, I'm an elder millennial, this really defined American foreign policy in the 2000s and really even into the 2010s. Obama himself also talks about things like democracy and humanity and humane war and bringing effectively liberalism to the international space. But I think that this is, as you said, Crystal, this is just impossible to believe after the global war on terror. And what you see, and this is really interesting interesting, this transition to begin not even really in the first Trump administration, but more so in the Biden administration. So if you remember, Biden came into office framing international politics as a struggle between democracy and authoritarianism. But when you actually look at how policymakers in the Biden administration talked, for example, about the Ukraine war and Russia's invasion of Ukraine and why the United States should, for example, send weapons to Ukraine, they almost never talked about democracy or protecting Ukrainian democracy. They talked totally in the language of interests. Blinken says, like, the United States needs to do this, otherwise there'll be another power and that will be bad for American interests. They never talk about democracy. And obviously this is tripled down with the second Trump administration, who never even pretends to have this sort of global human rights vision. And what I think is really interesting here is that this is something that you don't only see in the United States, you also see it in China and you also see it in Russia. When you look at the national security strategies of China and Russia, there's almost no discussion of ideology. For example, the Chinese national security strategy, you'd think they'd mention communism or socialism. They mention it like something 13 times. And they mentioned security hundreds and hundreds of times. And in the Russian national security strategy, they barely mention ideology. So what you see here, I think, and then we could talk more about this, this is the consequence of what happens when all major nations on earth, basically every nation except North Korea, has embraced a capitalist form of organizing the industrial and post-industrial economies. There's nothing really ideological to fight over any longer. No one's promoting a fascist way to organize an economy. No one's even promoting a communist way to organize an economy. We're all different forms of capitalism. So where Francis Fukuyama said that the end of history would mean the triumph of liberalism, what we see is that the end of history, which is to say the spread of capitalism, actually just means that liberalism itself is withering away. And I think this explains a lot about international politics and also domestic politics.
One of the things that you said, which is important there, is the World War II at the most reductive level could be understood as this, battle between authoritarianism and fascist organization alongside democracy or the people's way. One way is literal Bolshevism, other is democracy. A lot more complicated than that, but that's an easy way to understand it. However, the Chinese are just better capitalists than we are at a certain point. Russia itself is like state-sponsored capitalism. We're not fighting about that. We're fighting in the language of interest. But as I understand it, I actually think that maybe what makes the world more dangerous, because if we're all just scrambling for interest and not even having ideological underpinning, it seems to make conflict more likely. I'm curious for your reaction.
Well, it could go either way, because when you look at what the United States thought about the Soviet Union, particularly in the 1950s, effectively until the Cuban Missile Crisis, American policymakers viewed the Soviet Union as totally illegitimate because it was so ideologically different. They thought that you couldn't actually make deals. Now, wise foreign policymakers in a world organized around interest might actually find it easier to reach deals because there are just these quote unquote objective. Now, nothing's objective, but you know what I'm saying here. There are these spaces where you could agree. You could agree to work together about climate change. You could agree to work together about global inequality. The problem is that American foreign policy is still ideological in the sense of not liberal-based, but Americans still believe that they need to dominate the world. The Americans still believe, many Americans at least still believe, that there's no genuine alternative to American empire. So an American foreign policy elite that embraces a form of imperialist realism, even as they know the United States is not going to make the world a better place, actually makes international politics more dangerous, because then maybe you're not going to leave East Asia. Maybe you genuinely believe that you have to stay in East Asia for American security. And even someone who's genuinely good on some of these things, like John Mersheimer, he argues that the United States needs to maintain its forward position in East Asia basically now until the end of time. So I think it's those types of ideas that the United States needs to maintain a global primacy now and forever that could actually make the world more dangerous, Sagar, like you're claiming. But it doesn't have to be that way, but it currently is now.
Interesting.
Dan, how does AI development fit into your analysis? You've got Elon Musk in a recent interview saying not only is everyone going to have universal high income, but money is not going to be a thing. You've had books written from the left about, fully automated luxury communism that could potentially be enabled by AI. You have all of these tech oligarchs who are basically talking about how we need to rip up the current social contract and do something completely different. I mean, doesn't that potentially augur for a new ideological valence and new systems that break significantly from the capitalist order that we have now that could come into play over the next decade or so?
Absolutely. I think it's really important. And I think to my mind, and I think I'm perhaps a little unique on the left where I situate myself on this, I think the major problem with AI is that it's going to exist under capitalism, because to some degree, you could view it as achieving Marx's fantasy, where you no longer have to engage in the types of BS jobs that someone like David Graeber wrote about, that it would actually free you to rear cattle in the morning and criticize in the afternoon and drink beer in the evenings. But in actually existing capitalism, all it's going to do is basically destroy labor. And I view AI primarily as related to the falling rate of profit, which is this idea put forward by Marx and other economists, not just Marxists, which is that over time, profits become more difficult to basically squeeze out of a capitalist order. I mean, the way that I talk about it to my students is, if you build St. Louis in the 19th century, you're going to make a lot of money. But now in the 21st century, you have to basically manipulate financial derivatives in order to achieve a stable level of growth. So I think that the capitalist class, whether consciously or unconsciously, is trying to deindustrialize the white collar and professional managerial class. So that's what I think artificial intelligence, primarily its economic incentive, is. And when it comes to international politics, I think the major issue that we could face is something that we saw in Iran, which is AI doing target selection based on outmoded data, and you get it seems to be you get the destruction of children's schools, and there's also potential for AI arms races and things along those lines. But I think the technology is a bit too immature to see where that will go. But like atomic weaponry, you would ideally have some form of international regulation of it. But again, in this interest-based world where the United States thinks it has to be primed now and forever, it's unlikely you're going to get that.
So just going forward, like so we're going to have a new world order, obviously, that loaded term, but it's actually literally quite coming. So what's that, what are our different options here? You just said there's one, East Asia. I agree with Mearsheimer, for the record. We could debate that a little bit later. That's one option, is kind of retrenchment, focusing on core objectives. The other is the Iran option, is you break the back of the empire on a stupid foreign conflict, which is completely meaningless. If you were to look at history, that's usually how an empire dies. I guess another option is that we end up potentially fighting the mythical Taiwan conflict. Where could we end up? What do you think?
I mean, I think the choice is between restraining and reduction of American presence abroad or fighting wars. I think, just to put it in its starkest terms, either the United States is going to reduce its global footprint. It's, at this point, 750 or so military bases. It's going to accept that it's no longer the power it was in 1945 or 1989 or 91, and it is going to come home, which I actually think is a much deeper held strand in American politics. And actually the period since World War II is quite unique, going back to George.
I totally agree. Yeah. That's how it was. That was the normal outcome for the majority of history.
Precisely. And you look at George Washington's farewell address, which was actually a letter, fun fact. He warns against not participating in foreign entanglements in Europe. But, people have talked about this elsewhere. This isn't to deny that the United States has always been an empire. Westward expansion, native tribes are understood as foreign nations, literally, which is why Neil Gorsuch is ironically good on native relations. But I think that we're entering a moment where we really need to rethink global power. And if we don't accept novel realities, I think we're going to get violent. And let's just link this to Iran, because I think it's difficult to know right now, but I think we might look back on the Iran conflict as auguring a revolution in military affairs of the type that we haven't really seen since the invention of the rifle in the middle of the 19th century, and then later the machine gun. Because before the rifle and the machine gun, you had basically Napoleonic battles. Armies would face and they'd go at each other. Robert E. Lee discovered that wasn't how it worked during the Civil War. And then all the European leaders discovered that wasn't how it worked in World War I, because the machine gun could just mow you down. I think that the biggest thing happening in military affairs right now is the effects of drone warfare. The way that I put it, think about, what if one day the United States puts an aircraft carrier in the South China Sea and China sends literally 1 million drones at that aircraft carrier. This is a transformation in warfare that is also, as we've already seen, going to force a wise American foreign policy elite. Not sure we have the wise blob, but imagine that we did, to actually rethink basing. These are structures, literal American bases. A lot of these were bases that were taken over from the British Empire during World War II. They are artifacts of a different age of warfare. And the age of drone warfare literally send 1 million drones to the Middle Eastern bases. But it doesn't seem like the foreign policy policy establishment is rethinking those fundamental premises. And again, this is imperialist realism, this notion that you really can't think an alternative world, which is the type of thing that could lead to violence.
Wow. Well, very smart
Absolutely
analysis.
fascinating, Dan.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, you're welcome. Everybody go.
A few days ago, Vladimir Putin made a statement that shocked Western globalists to the core. In particular, he officially stated that the Russian economy is in a stable state, and gross domestic product in the first 5 months of 2026 showed growth of 0.2%. Moreover, Putin also stated that Russia continues to hold the status of Europe's largest economy, and that problems in the fuel market are temporary for Russia. Against this backdrop, it is also worth paying attention to the statement of the Bloomberg agency. So, at the end of May 2026, Bloomberg admitted that the Russian ruble took first place in the ranking of the best world currencies. As it turned out, by the end of April 2026, the ruble showed an increase of 8.38% and took the first place in the world ranking. In total, over the past 90 days, the Russian ruble has strengthened against the US dollar by 12%, which has become an absolute record over the past few years. At the same time, Bloomberg admitted that the Turkish lira performed the worst, losing more than 23% of its value. By the way, speaking of the success of the Russian economy, Vladimir Putin also said that the BRICS leadership in the global economy continues to grow rapidly. According to him, the indicators of Western economies continue to decline rapidly relative to those of the BRICS countries. It is noteworthy that the successes and strengthening of the BRICS became so obvious that even the West, led by the United States, was forced to admit this. Meanwhile, the increase in the number of applications for joining the BRICS has caused concern in Washington. Unfortunately for the West, the NATO member countries also make no secret of their desire to join the BRICS. For example, Turkey officially applied to join BRICS immediately after countries such as the United Arab Emirates, Iran, Ethiopia, and Egypt became members of this organization. It is noteworthy that Indonesia also became a member of the BRICS in January 2025. Furthermore, representatives of this organization officially confirmed that at the moment, about 30 states have applied to join the BRICS. My dear truth seekers, the desire of these countries to join the BRICS is absolutely understandable. Today, BRICS is turning into an organization that expresses alternative points of view on the future world order and global development. I am absolutely sure that BRICS in the future can replace the world's leading organizations, which today are not coping with the tasks assigned to them. BRICS can replace the G20, as many countries in Asia, Africa, and Latin America are already expressing their desire to join BRICS as soon as possible. As a result, we will see the world's new organization model, which will help solve problems that the United Nations, UNESCO, and others cannot cope with. There is no sense from these old organizations anymore. So, it's time to reconsider the format and create a new platform for dialogue. While Western countries are sinking, the rest of the world is trying to survive. My dear truth seekers, if you think that the problems of Western countries began after the start of the conflict in Ukraine and the subsequent sanctions against Russia, then you are deeply mistaken. You must understand that the entire Western system of the unipolar world was originally built, based on temporary privileges, which sooner or later must burst like a soap bubble. World inflation began to gain momentum because the West printed too many dollars and euros. It has affected all countries worldwide. At the same time, it is worth noting that the problems of the West are just beginning. Western countries are already facing a serious crisis due to an energy shortage. And this crisis will only get worse in the coming years. Meanwhile, most of the natural resources and food are in the hands of the BRICS countries. BRICS includes 42% of the world's population, 2.83 billion people. This is more than the population of all Western countries combined. This means that the BRICS countries have the largest market for their goods. And these BRICS countries pay for these goods with real money, which is not printed in huge quantities, as in the West. In addition, joining the BRICS means getting more profitable contracts when trading with other participants. The countries of the world are well aware of all this, and therefore, strive to join this organization. It's obvious that global changes leaning towards multipolarity are irritating the West, led by the United States. Washington and its so-called closest allies are putting pressure on the BRICS countries. Moreover, the West is even threatening new countries that wish to join BRICS with sanctions. At the same time, the West itself began to perceive BRICS as one of the main threats to its world influence. Washington is well aware that even some supporters of the United States may change their position on BRICS. In this regard, the United States has already begun to perceive this organization as its enemy. However, many experts are confident that all this will only strengthen the BRICS status as a multipolar organization that opposes Washington's position. My dear friends, I am absolutely sure that in the future, even some Western countries will express a desire to become BRICS members. In this regard, the United States already considers BRICS as an organization that will provide tough resistance to Washington's global expansion. In the near future, the confrontation between BRICS and Western organizations will only intensify. My dear truth seekers, you must understand that at the moment, the United States has only one goal: to preserve its dying dollar empire and the unipolar world. At the same time, Washington is very painful going through the loss of its hegemon status, and doing everything possible to somehow prolong the life of the old world order, and prevent the final arrival of a multipolar world. Although many Western experts say that sooner or later the United States will still have to recognize the power of the BRICS, and say goodbye to the unipolar world order, some American politicians continue to deny the obvious, arguing that a multipolar world will never rule the planet. Well, my dear truth seekers, I would advise these American politicians to moderate their belligerent fervor, because it was their arrogance and blind faith in American exceptionalism that brought the United States to the brink of economic depression and loss of prestige around the world. Thus, it becomes clear that BRICS is rapidly gaining strength, and is the very organization of the multipolar world that will finally bury the unipolar American model of global governance. And the worst thing for the United States is that BRICS is not only an alternative to a unipolar world, but is also becoming an increasingly attractive organization for most countries in the world, including for those whom the United States considered its allies.
Cool figure. Follow me.